Let the day fade away. Settle into your bed or favorite chair, lower the lights, and let's take a slow journey into the past. We'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Drop a comment if you'd like to share. The sun is barely aglow on the horizon, yet you're already up, feeling the cool earth beneath your bare feet. Welcome to the life of an 8th century Mayan farmer in Yucatan, where the rooster is more reliable than your modern alarm clock, and the morning mist is your only coffee. You stretch out your muscles because today, like every day, the field awaits, and we're not talking a leisurely garden stroll. No, you're stepping into the ancient art of agriculture that feeds an entire city-state. Now, let's talk tools. Today, your weapon of choice is a trusty koa, a kind of digging stick that's been around longer than anyone can remember. It's simple, efficient, and perfect for poking holes into the stubborn earth for planting maize. That's corn, the golden star of the Mayan diet, your ancient equivalent of bread and butter. Sure, it might sound romantic, this idea of nurturing life from the soil, but it's less poetry and more perspiration. You're not just planting maize, you're growing the fuel that powers the entire social structure. Speaking of structures, let's touch on the societal ladder you're climbing every morning. As a farmer, you're not just a cog in the machine, you're the whole engine room. Your maize fields are the beating heart of Mayan economics. The city-state relies on you to produce enough food to support not just the farmers, but the priests, the nobles, and the artisans. No pressure, right? It's like being the MVP on a team where everyone else is expecting to be fed and entertained. The Mayan calendar is your guide, and not just for planting. This isn't some casual, I'll plant when I feel like it scenario. The Mayans were obsessed, truly obsessed with timekeeping. They had a knack for knowing exactly when to plant, when to harvest, and when to perform the necessary rituals to ensure a good yield. Your life is steeped in the Zolkin, the sacred calendar that dictates your agricultural schedule with a precision that would make modern planners weep with envy. But let's not get too dreamy-eyed about the romance of it all. The reality is, farming without modern machinery is tough. Clearing fields isn't just a matter of waving a magic wand. It's hard labor requiring sweat and muscle. You're battling against nature with nothing but hand tools and determination. The romantic image of a farmer in a picturesque field is often just that, a picturesque image. The truth is, you're breaking your back every day, ensuring that those around you can fill their bellies. Yet, there's a certain satisfaction in this life, a rhythm that feels right, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. You know that every seed you plant, every stalk of maize that reaches for the sky, is a testament to your hard work. It's a legacy that stretches back generations, a connection to the past that you can feel in every callus on your hands. And let's not forget community. Farming isn't a solitary endeavor. You're part of a collective effort, a shared responsibility that ties you to your fellow workers. There's a camaraderie in the fields, a shared understanding of the labor that binds you all together. You might grumble about the aches and pains, but there's pride too. You're doing something that matters deeply, something that keeps the wheels of the world turning. As the sun climbs higher, you can already feel the heat building. It's going to be a long day, but you've got this. After all, you're a Mayan farmer, and this is what you do. You feed a civilization, one maize plant at a time. And just as you're settling into the groove, the churning gears of Mayan economics start to hum around you. It's not all sweat and soil out here. There's a whole world of trade and barter waiting to unfold. Now, if you think dealing with modern markets is a headache, imagine navigating a world where currency isn't coin, but cacao beans and obsidian. That's right, your hard-earned produce is your ticket to the bustling, if somewhat chaotic, market scene. Let's dive into the economics of it all, shall we? The Mayans were savvy traders. We're talking long before Wall Street and stock tickers, they were wheeling and dealing across vast distances. You're not just growing maize for your family. You're part of a sophisticated network that stretches far beyond your local fields. Imagine lugging sacks of maize to a bustling market square where the air's thick with the scent of everything from exotic spices to freshly caught fish. It's a sensory overload, minus the convenience of a shopping cart. But let's not get too utopian about these markets. They're not exactly the harmonious melting pots of cultural exchange that some romantic tales would have you believe. Sure, trade is happening, but it involves a lot of haggling, hand gestures, and the occasional shouting match. You see, without a standardized currency, The value of goods is as flexible as your neighbour's idea of fair trade. A sack of maize might get you a few cacao beans one day and a beautiful jade pendant the next, depending on how shrewdly you negotiate, or how desperately someone needs their maize fix. And speaking of cacao, let's not overlook its role as a status symbol. While you're munching on your humble staple of maize, the elite are sipping frothy cacao drinks as a display of wealth and power. Forget your morning latte. This is the ancient world's version of flaunting a designer coffee cup. Not to say you'd turn down a chance to trade your corn for a handful of those precious beans, especially when they double as an ancient ATM card. Now, let's talk politics. Your life as a farmer is more intertwined with the machinations of Mayan city-states than you might think. Larger political entities have their fingers in every pie, yours included. These city-states are like the ancient version of the Fortune 500, wielding power and influence that ripple through your daily grind. Your maize, while feeding the masses, also feeds the political machine. Tribute and taxes are a thing, even in the 8th century Yucatan. You're not just growing food, you're growing capital for the ruling class. Think of it as the original trickle-up economics. It's easy to get caught up in the romanticized idea of a wealthy Maya civilization, glittering with gold and prosperity. But let's burst that bubble right here. While the Maya were advanced in many ways, wealth, in the form of gold, wasn't exactly pouring from every rooftop. The real wealth was more about the clout and influence wielded through strategic alliances and the goods that symbolized power, like jade, obsidian, and, yes, those cacao beans. And let's not forget the practical challenges of commerce in a world without roads as we know them. Transporting goods across dense jungles and rugged terrain is a logistical nightmare. You're not hopping into a truck for a quick delivery run. You're embarking on what feels like an epic quest worthy of its own saga. Every trip to market is a calculated gamble, with the potential for profit balanced against the very real threat of bandits or natural obstacles. It's not just a market visit, it's an adventure in survival and negotiation. So, as you're standing there, maize in hand, eyeing the goods around you, remember this. The market is as much a battle of wits as it is a place of exchange. You're not just a farmer, you're a player in a complex economic system that helps sustain one of history's most fascinating civilizations. This isn't just trading, it's a dance of diplomacy, resourcefulness, and sometimes sheer luck. But hey, who doesn't love a little drama with their daily bread or maize in your case? And just as the market scene starts to fade behind you, you're reminded that the afternoon isn't just about haggling over cacao beans. It's time to dive into the intricate web of kinship and community that weaves through your life like the patterns on a vibrant Mayan textile. Let's talk family, your ancient support network and social security rolled into one. The Mayan family structure isn't just about mom, dad, and the kids. No, it's an extended affair, like the kind that would fill an entire group chat with endless notifications. We're talking about aunts, uncles, cousins, and in-laws, all living in a cluster of homes, supporting each other like the human scaffolding of society. In fact, it's common for several generations to live together, sharing resources and responsibilities. Think of it as the original communal living, minus the Instagram-ready aesthetics. Now, you might think a family gathering around a hearth sounds idyllic, but let's debunk the myth of the constant family harmony right here. Just like today, living in close quarters with your extended family can be a mix of love, loyalty, and the occasional squabble over who ate the last tamale. But it's all part of the package. These bonds provide more than just emotional warmth. They're your insurance policy against the unpredictabilities of life, be it crop failure or political upheaval. And speaking of politics, family ties extend beyond your immediate circle into the wider community. It's not just about sharing chores and meals, it's about clan alliances that can make or break your social standing. Picture this. Your uncle marries into a powerful family in the next village, and suddenly your social capital gets a nifty bump. It's like networking, Mayan style, where who you know can have as much impact as what you grow. Let's not ignore the societal expectations that come with this tightly knit setup. As a Mayan farmer, you're expected to uphold the values and traditions passed down through generations. You've got roles to play, whether it's participating in communal building projects or performing specific rituals. This isn't just about maintaining social cohesion, it's about ensuring survival. Every task, from tending the fields to participating in ceremonies, is geared towards keeping the community thriving. You see, in a world where every resource counts, your contribution matters a lot. Now, let's pivot to religion, the invisible hand guiding your daily life. Mayan religious practices are as complex as they are fascinating. You might have heard the tales of grandiose rituals, bloodletting, and human sacrifices, and while there's some truth to these stories, there's also a whole other layer to explore. Religion isn't just a series of dramatic ceremonies, it's woven into the very fabric of your existence. It's the cosmic glue that binds the natural and supernatural, the living and the divine. But hold your horses. Before you start picturing Indiana Jones-style temples and mystical chants, let's ground this in reality. Yes, there are rituals, and yes, they can get intense. Human sacrifice did happen, but it wasn't an everyday occurrence contrary to popular belief. These were high-stakes events reserved for significant occasions, not your run-of-the-mill Sunday service. The day-to-day religious life is more about maintaining harmony with the gods through offerings, prayers, and community gatherings. It's about aligning your actions with the celestial cycles, ensuring that the maize grows tall and the rains arrive on time. And here's where the myth-busting gets juicy. There's a romanticized notion that the Maya were consumed by obsession with the afterlife, living in constant fear of angering the gods. But let's flip that script. While appeasing the gods was essential, it wasn't driven by fear alone. It was about balance, a cosmic give and take. The gods provided the rain, the sun, the fertile soil, and in return you offered your gratitude, a bit of maize perhaps, or a small sacrifice. It's less about fear and more about respect, a relationship with the divine that's as practical as it is spiritual. Speaking of practicality, let's get into the nitty-gritty of these religious practices. Take the calendar, for example, a masterpiece of astronomical and mathematical precision. It's not just for marking holidays, it's your guide to everything from agricultural cycles to religious festivals. The Harb, a 365-day calendar, keeps you aligned with the solar year, while the sacred Solkin, with its 260 days, guides you through the spiritual ebb and flow. Together, they're like the ultimate cosmic planner, ensuring that you never miss a planting season or a festival. Now, let's shine a light on those grand ceremonies that often steal the spotlight. They're not just for show, they're a blend of politics, religion, and community bonding. When a new pyramid is dedicated or a significant victory is celebrated, it's a chance for the entire city-state to come together. It's a spectacle of rituals, feasting, and dancing where everyone has a role to play. And while the elite might get the best seats in the house, you're still part of the action, a participant in the drama of life and death, power and renewal. But let's not get too carried away with the grandeur. Beneath the surface of these legendary events lies the everyday reality of religious life, humble yet profound. You're lighting incense at a home altar, whispering prayers as the sun rises, participating in small rituals that reinforce your connection to the divine. It's a tapestry of belief that's as rich and textured as the jungle that surrounds you. And as the afternoon sun starts to dip, casting long shadows over the fields, you're reminded that your life is a delicate balance of duty, belief, and community. You're not just a farmer, a member of a family, or a participant in religious rituals. You're part of a living history, a custodian of traditions that stretch back through the sands of time. And while the myths and legends might paint a picture of grandeur and mysticism, the reality is both simpler and more profound. It's a life of purpose, where every action, no matter how small, contributes to the greater whole. So as you make your way back home, dust clinging to your skin and the weight of the day heavy on your shoulders, remember this: you're not just living history, you're making it. One maize stalk, one prayer, one family meal at a time. The afternoon fades into evening, but the story is far from over. There's more to explore, more to discover, and more myths to unravel. But for now, take a breath, savor the moment, and get ready for what's next in this rich tapestry of Mayan life. As the evening shadows stretch their fingers over the Yucatan landscape, you're likely thinking about unwinding after a long day. But just as Netflix might tempt the modern soul, the allure of Mayan architecture beckons you. Let's dive into the architectural feats of your civilization, where the pyramids aren't just overgrown staircases, and the observatories aren't just for stargazing. First off, let's tackle the elephant in the room, those grandiose pyramids. Forget the fuzzy alien theories that suggest extraterrestrial architects had their hands in the mix. Sure, it's tempting to think little green men might have swung by with blueprints, but the reality is far more grounded and impressive. Mayan pyramids, like the iconic temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza, stand as testaments to human ingenuity. Built around 1050 AD, this pyramid, with its precise alignment to the equinox, is a feat of engineering and astronomy, not alien intervention. You, as a farmer, might not be chiseling stones or designing star-aligned staircases, but your role is crucial. Without the food you grow, the labourers hauling limestone blocks, some weighing up to 8 tons each, wouldn't have the energy to build these mammoth structures. It's a classic case of no pain, no pyramid, where your sweat in the fields translates to monumental achievements on the skyline. Now, let's talk labour. Constructing a pyramid wasn't a weekend do-it-yourself project. It required thousands of workers, often conscripted farmers like yourself during the agricultural off-season. It's a bit like being drafted into a historical home improvement show, minus the power tools. Imagine the rhythm of stone being chipped away, the air filled with the sound of chisels and the grunts of labourers, all under the watchful eye of overseers, ensuring each stone was precisely placed. But what does this mean for you? Well, while the thought of contributing to such a grand project might fill you with a sense of pride, it also comes with societal costs. For one, your absence from the fields means less personal time and fewer resources for your family. And let's not sugarcoat it. These projects were as much about demonstrating the power of the ruling elite as they were about cultural or religious significance. Speaking of power, these constructions were the political equivalent of a "look what I can do" statement from the rulers. The bigger and more elaborate the structure, the more it reinforced the rulers' divine right and their connection to the gods. The Temple of the Inscriptions at Palenque, with its detailed hieroglyphic inscriptions, is a prime example of how architecture was used to cement power and legacy. Now, onto the observatories, like the famous El Caracol at Chichen Itza. These structures weren't just for celestial sightseeing. They were vital for the Mayans' sophisticated understanding of astronomy, which dictated everything from agricultural cycles to religious ceremonies. Think of them as the ancient version of a NASA control room, minus the computers, but with a lot more stone. But here's the kicker. Such projects were not just about star charts and solstice calculations. They were political theatres, showcasing a ruler's wisdom and divine favour. And while you might not be mapping the heavens, your role in supplying food meant these astronomers could focus on the stars without worrying about their next meal. Let's have a reality check. The construction of these architectural wonders wasn't all sunshine and cacao. It involved back-breaking labour under the oppressive heat, with workers often subjected to harsh conditions and strict hierarchies. The myth of a utopian workforce working in harmony fades when you consider the social stratification and the demands placed on the lower classes. The societal impact of these grand projects is significant. Not only do they require enormous resources and labour, which could be a drain on the local economy, but they also reinforce the social hierarchy. As a farmer, you're part of a system that sustains the elite's ambitions, yet you're often left with the question of what tangible benefits these projects bring to your daily life. Yet, there's an undeniable allure to these structures. They stand as symbols of a civilization's achievements, of dreams etched in stone. While the romantic notion of participating in such monumental undertakings might warm the historical heart, the reality is a complex web of sacrifice, ambition, and human endurance. So, as you sit down for your evening meal, perhaps by the flicker of a small fire, consider this. Every stone in those pyramids, every angle in those observatories, carries the weight of countless lives like yours. It's a legacy of human tenacity and creativity, wrapped in the myths and stories that continue to captivate us. The night deepens, but the story of your world is far from over. There's still more to explore, more truths to uncover, and more myths to unravel. But for now, let's pause and appreciate the wonder of what has been built, both in stone and in history, by hands just like yours. As the night sky spreads its starry blanket over the Yucatan, it's tempting to gaze up and lose yourself in the cosmos, just like the Mayan astronomers did centuries ago. But let's bring that focus down to earth, to the real legacy of the Maya, and not just the ruins they left behind. First things first, Let's address the elephant, or should I say jaguar in the room, the so-called mysterious disappearance of the Maya. Spoiler alert, they didn't just vanish into thin air like a magician's assistant. The allure of that mystery is irresistible, sure, but the truth is much more complex and, dare I say, human. So, what really happened? Why did the grand cities of the Maya, once buzzing hives of activity, become overgrown with jungle silence? The answer isn't found in a single dramatic event, but rather in a series of unfortunate events that would make even Lemony Snicket shake his head. Let's start with drought. Evidence from lake sediments and cave stalagmites suggests that a series of severe droughts struck the region between 800 and 1000 AD. Imagine trying to run a civilization when the skies refuse to cooperate, and your maize fields are as barren as a desert. Not exactly the kind of plot twist you want in your agricultural drama. Then there's warfare. The Maya weren't just sitting around sipping cacao. City-states often engaged in conflicts over resources and political dominance. This wasn't just a few skirmishes here and there. We're talking about full-blown warfare that strained resources and fractured alliances. It's like Game of Thrones, minus the dragons, but with plenty of human ambition and folly to go around. Resource depletion also played a starring role in this saga. As cities grew, they put enormous pressure on the surrounding environment. Deforestation for agriculture and construction led to soil erosion and a decline in fertility, making it harder to sustain large populations. It's a classic case of biting off more than you can sustainably chew, but let's not paint the Maya as victims of their circumstances. They were an incredibly resilient people who adapted and innovated in response to challenges. When the central lowlands became less hospitable, many Maya communities moved to the northern Yucatan and the highlands of Guatemala, where they continued to thrive. The Maya civilization didn't end, it transformed. And today, millions of Maya descendants still live in these regions, maintaining many aspects of their ancestral culture. Take the Maya language, for instance. It's not just a relic of the past, but a living tongue spoken by around 6 million people today. And the traditional agricultural practices, like milpa farming, which involves rotational farming and forest management, are still in use. These are not just quaint traditions, but practical solutions honed over centuries. Now, let's talk about the myths. The romantic notion of a lost civilization swallowed by the jungle is compelling, like something out of an adventure novel. But it's also a disservice to the vibrant, dynamic culture that existed then and continues in many forms today. The Maya were not passive players in their history. They were innovators, creators, and survivors. Their legacy is not just in the stones of Chichen Itza or the intricate glyphs of Copan, but in the living traditions and languages that continue to enrich our world. What does all this tell us about the nature of history? It's messy, complex, and often defies the neat narratives we like to impose. The Maya civilization was a tapestry of triumphs and challenges, much like any other. It reminds us that civilizations don't simply rise and fall in isolation. They evolve, influenced by a myriad of factors, both internal and external. So, what does your day as a Mayan farmer reveal about history's complexities? It shows us that the past isn't just about grand monuments and epic battles. It's about the everyday lives of people like you. It's about how they adapted to their world, faced challenges, and left a legacy that continues to touch lives today. It's a reminder that history is not just the story of the powerful, but also of the everyday heroes who, through their toil and tenacity, laid the foundations for the future. As you drift into sleep, consider this. You're not just a witness to history, you're a participant in its ongoing saga. The past is not a distant land, but a mirror reflecting the struggles and achievements that shape our present and future. And while the ruins of the Maya may stand silent, their story is far from over. It's a story we're all a part of, written in the stars, the soil, and the enduring spirit of those who walked this earth before us. It's a bright morning in 9th century Tikal, and here you are, an artisan at the heart of one of the most impressive cities the Maya ever built. The sun's already casting long shadows across the plazas, and you swear you can almost hear the ancient stones humming with history. This isn't just any place, it's Tikal, where the air is thick with the scent of copal incense, and the daily grind involves more than just surviving. It's about creating beauty and leaving a legacy. As you step out into the bustling city, the towering pyramids catch your eye, piercing the sky with their limestone majesty. Tikal isn't just grand, It's a statement, a power play etched in stone. These structures are like Instagram posts of their time, but instead of likes, they're snapping up political influence and respect. Take the Temple of the Great Jaguar, for instance. Built in honor of King Jasor Tranquil I.e. This isn't just a place of worship. It's a massive, I'm the king, deal with it, carved into the skyline. Under King Jasor Tranquil I, who reigned from 682 to 734 AD, Tikal has been flexing its muscles, not just in terms of sheer size, but in political prowess too. It's like Game of Thrones, minus the dragons, but with just as much intrigue. You, as an artisan, are a cog in this grand machine. Your work contributes to the image of power the king projects, crafting pieces that whisper tales of strength and divinity. Now, let's talk shop materials and tools. You don't just pick up any old rock and start chipping away. No, you're working with obsidian and jade, the rock stars of the Mesoamerican world. Obsidian blades are the sharpest tools in your kit, easily rivaling modern steel, and jade? Well, jade is the emerald of the Maya world, revered for its beauty and spiritual significance. But these aren't local finds, they're the products of a vast trade network that stretches far beyond Tikal. Obsidian comes from the highlands of Guatemala, while jade is sourced from the Motagua Valley. It's a logistical feat that would impress even Amazon Prime. Every piece you carve or inlay is a testament to this interconnected world. Your hand-shaped materials that have travelled hundreds of miles, crossing the territories of allies and sometimes rivals. Trade routes are the lifeblood of the city, and they're as much about politics as they are about commerce. Each shipment of obsidian or jade represents alliances and power plays, a metaphorical handshake between kings. The tools you wield are simple yet effective. Stone chisels, bone needles, and wooden mallets are your companions, and with them you transform raw materials into objects of desire and reverence. Your workshop is alive with the rhythmic tap-tap of work in progress, each strike echoing through the ages. It's not just about making pretty things. It's a delicate dance with destiny, where every artifact you create could end up in the hands of a noble or on the altar of a temple. As you work, you can't help but marvel at the sheer audacity of Tikal. This city, at its peak, was home to tens of thousands estimates, peg at around 90,000 people, a metropolis by ancient standards. The noise, the colours, the sheer human energy. It's like the New York City of the jungle, but with fewer yellow cabs and more howler monkeys. Yet, there's a tension in the air. Tikal is more than just a city. It's the epicenter of a civilization that's constantly in flux. Politics here are as intricate as the patterns you etch into stone. You're part of a society where status and spirituality are inextricably linked, and every artifact you produce is a piece of that puzzle. But for now, let's soak in the moment. The sun climbs higher, casting a warm glow over the city as you lose yourself in the rhythm of creation. This is Tikal, after all, a place where history isn't just written, it's carved, moulded, and polished into the very fabric of life. And for today, you're not just an observer of history, you're its artisan. With the sun casting an even warmer glow over Tikal, you're not just basking in the light, you're deep in the craft that defines your days and, quite possibly, your social standing. Welcome to the Mesoamerican stock market, where your artisan goods are the currency and bartering is the name of the game. Forget about Bitcoin, it's all about jade and obsidian here, precious commodities that make the city tick. Let's talk economics, shall we? You're not just creating art, you're minting value. Every piece of jade or obsidian you sculpt is a small fortune in the making. The Maya didn't have the luxury of minted coinage, so your finely crafted goods are more than just objects. They're currency, social capital, and a testament to your prowess. And here's a kicker. The value of your work isn't just measured in raw material or labour, but in skilled craftsmanship that elevates a chunk of rock into a coveted treasure. An obsidian blade, for example, could be traded for staples like maize or cacao, essential items that kept the whole show running. Bartering in Tikal is like a high-stakes poker game, minus the poker face, because everyone knows everyone else's business. You're trading not just goods, but stories, alliances, and sometimes grudges. Ever tried haggling over the price of a carved jade pendant, while the guy across from you remembers that time you outbid him for a prime piece of obsidian? These exchanges aren't just economic transactions, They're social negotiations, balancing acts of power and prestige. Now, let's pull back the curtain on the artisan guilds. These aren't your everyday social clubs, they're the backbone of Tikal's economic structure. Imagine a blend of a medieval guild and a modern-day union, but with more feathers and fewer labour strikes. Guilds define your role and influence in society, setting the standards for craftsmanship while also acting as a support network. They control the flow of materials, ensuring only the best obsidian and jade make it into the hands of skilled artisans like yourself. Think of them as the gatekeepers of quality and tradition, with a hint of nepotism because, let's face it, some things never change. As an artisan, your standing in the guild is like your status update in the ancient Facebook of Tikal. Higher standing means better materials and prime spots in the bustling marketplaces, where nobles and merchants alike come to marvel at your handiwork. But don't think it's all smooth sailing. Guild politics are as sharp as your obsidian blades, and navigating them requires the finesse of a diplomat and the patience of a saint. Play your cards right, and you could find yourself crafting pieces for the elite, your work adorning the halls of power. Mess up, and you might be relegated to carving trinkets for the tourists, if there were any. The economic web of Tikal extends beyond the guilds, stretching across the vast Mesoamerican trade network. Your obsidian might come from the highlands of Guatemala, but your finished products could end up as far afield as Teotihuacan in the Valley of Mexico. This interconnectedness is the city's lifeblood, a complex dance of supply and demand, alliances and rivalries. It's like the Silk Road of the New World, minus the camel caravans and plus a lot more humidity. Amidst all this, you're more than just an artisan. You're a participant in a grand economic experiment. Tikal is a microcosm of Mesoamerican trade, a bustling hub where goods, ideas and people flow like the rivers that sustain the land. It's a dynamic system, constantly evolving with the rise and fall of kings, the shifts in trade routes, and the whims of fashion. Because yes, even the ancient Maya had trends to follow. In the thick of it all, you're shaping history with every strike of your chisel, crafting not just objects but legacies. Your work tells the story of a civilization, its highs and lows, its triumphs and tragedies. It's a tale written in stone and jade, a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of a people who thrived in the heart of the jungle. As the sun continues its climb, casting intricate shadows on the ground, you pause for a moment. The rhythm of your work is more than just a routine. It's a melody that echoes through the ages, a reminder that even amidst the economic calculations and political machinations, there's beauty to be found in creation. And so, with a deep breath, you dive back into your craft, a small but vital cog in the grand machine of Tikal, a city that stands not just as a testament to power, but to the enduring spirit of the artisans who shaped its legacy. As the sun hits its zenith, the heat is practically a character in its own right, nudging you to take a break from the relentless rhythm of your chisel. While the city of Tikal buzzes with life, let's dive into what truly sets you apart as an artisan in this Mesoamerican metropolis. The innovations and techniques that make your work not just a craft, but a cosmic calling. First up, let's talk about your secret weapons, the techniques that take your work from ordinary to legendary. You're not just hacking away at stone, you're performing a delicate dance with texture and color. Take jade carving, for instance. This isn't just about shaping a stone, it's about coaxing out its soul. The process is labor-intensive, involving meticulous grinding with sand and water to achieve that perfect, glassy finish. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of getting that perfect Instagram filter. It's all about the polish. Obsidian, on the other hand, requires a different kind of finesse. This volcanic glass is notorious for its sharp edges, sharper than a modern scalpel. You're not just chipping away at it, you're sculpting with precision, tapping into techniques that have been passed down through generations. Pressure flaking, a method where you carefully apply force to create razor-thin blades, is your go-to move. It's like playing Jenga, but with higher stakes and fewer chances to shout timber if you mess up. But here's where things get really interesting: the role of religion and mythology in your designs. Now, it's easy to romanticize the idea that every piece you create is divinely inspired, a direct line to the gods. While that makes for a great story, the reality is a bit more down to earth. Sure, your work is infused with spiritual motifs and symbols, but these aren't just arbitrary doodles. They're carefully chosen, calculated to resonate with the beliefs and values of your patrons. Take the depiction of the feathered serpent, a common motif in Mesoamerican art. It's not just a pretty design, it's a symbol of life, power, and the divine right of kings. The feathered serpent is a figure that bridges the earthly and the celestial, a potent reminder of the ruler's sacred authority. So, while your hands may be guided by the stories of the gods, your head is firmly in the realm of politics and propaganda. It's art with an agenda, a reminder that even in ancient times, image was everything. Now, let's bust a myth that's as persistent as a mosquito in the jungle, the notion that your work is purely a spiritual endeavor. The truth is, while spirituality is woven into every piece, you're also dealing with the very real pressures of production and quality control. It's not all divine inspiration and leisurely mornings in the workshop. No, you're on a schedule, a part of an economic machine that demands efficiency and perfection. The labor-intensive nature of your craft means you're constantly balancing quality with output. There's no room for error when each piece could take weeks, even months to complete. And let's not forget the challenge of sourcing materials. Those precious stones don't just fall from the sky. Every piece of obsidian or jade you use is a testament to the complex trade networks that crisscross Mesoamerica. It's like playing a game of logistics, Tetris, where every shipment is a potential puzzle piece. Here's a little nugget of reality. Quality control is a constant headache. You're not just competing with the natural flaws in the materials, you're also up against human error. A slip of the hand, a miscalculation in pressure, and you could be looking at a costly mistake. It's enough to make anyone want to toss their tools and take up a less stressful hobby, like, say, becoming a scribe. But the stakes are high, and the rewards, both personal and economic, are worth the risk. In the midst of this delicate balance, your work is a testament to innovation and adaptation. You're not just preserving tradition, you're pushing boundaries, experimenting with new techniques and styles. This is the heart of Tikal's artistic legacy, a dynamic blend of old and new, where every piece is both a nod to the past and a step into the future. And let's not ignore the practical realities of your everyday life as an artisan. While the romantic notion of a solitary genius might be appealing, the truth is you're part of a bustling community of craftsmen, each contributing their skills to the city's grandeur. Collaboration is key, whether it's sharing techniques, trading tips, or simply commiserating over the latest guild politics. In this grand tapestry of life and art, you're more than just a creator. You're a storyteller, a historian, a visionary. Every piece you craft is a chapter in the saga of Tikal, a city that stands as a monument to human ingenuity and resilience. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the stone plazas, you take a moment to reflect on your place in this vast narrative. The day isn't over yet, and neither is your journey through the vibrant world of Mesoamerican artistry. There's still much to explore, from the societal dynamics that shape your work to the ever-evolving techniques that define it. But for now, you return to your tools, ready to carve the next piece of history, one stroke at a time. As the sun arcs lazily across the Tikal skyline, it's time to delve into the afternoon hustle, where the artistry of your craft isn't just in what you create, but in what it represents. You, my friend, are more than a stone carver or a jewelry maker. You're a cultural alchemist, transforming raw materials into objects that pulse with meaning. Ceremonial masks, intricate jewelry. These aren't just baubles or trinkets. They're social currency, spiritual conduits, and status symbols all rolled into one. In other words, they're the ancient world's version of a power suit and a savvy Instagram post. Let's start with the ceremonial masks. These aren't just for Halloween shenanigans or masquerade balls. In 9th century Tikal, they're serious business. Imagine crafting a mask that could command the attention of gods and humans alike. These pieces have the power to transform the wearer, allowing them to channel deities or ancestors during rituals. It's like slipping into the skin of a divine being, a bit like method acting, but with more feathers and less Hollywood glam. The masks are often made from wood, but the real showstoppers are those adorned with jade, obsidian, and shell materials that are as much about spiritual resonance as they are about flashing your clout. And here's a fun tidbit. The design is crucial. The masks often depict jaguars, serpents, or kings. each symbol loaded with enough cultural significance to make a modern-day brand strategist weep with envy. Jaguars, for instance, are the embodiment of power and the underworld, a nod to the dual nature of life and death. You see, in Tikal, every element of your creation is a chapter in the lore, a story told in stone and shell. Next up, jewelry. Forget about today's bling. This is where the real magic happens. Jewelry in Tikal isn't just about looking fabulous at a royal ball, though, let's be honest, that's definitely a perk. These pieces are status symbols, a visual shorthand for political power and social prestige. A necklace of jade beads isn't just pretty, it's a declaration of wealth and authority. It's like wearing a neon sign that screams, "I have arrived, and yes, these are real jade." But let's not sugarcoat it. The process of creating these masterpieces is far from glamorous. It's labor-intensive, demanding an eye for detail that would make a Swiss watchmaker sweat. Each piece of jade is painstakingly shaped and polished, a task that could take weeks or even months. And don't get me started on the intricate beadwork. Stringing together hundreds of minuscule pieces is a job for the patient and the skilled. It's enough to make you question your career choices, but the payoff? Oh, it's worth every bead of sweat. And here's where it gets spicy. The myths surrounding your work. There's a romantic notion that artisans like you are mystical figures, channeling divine inspiration with every chisel stroke. The reality? You're working with tight deadlines and the ever-watchful eyes of patrons who expect nothing short of perfection. It's a bit like juggling swords while balancing on a tightrope. Impressive, sure, but also a tad stressful. The truth is, while spirituality is woven into your every creation, you're also a cog in a much larger machine. The social hierarchy of Tikal is as intricate as the jewelry you craft. Nobles flaunt their wealth through your creations, and every piece you make is a testament to their status. It's a world where appearances are everything, and you're the unsung hero behind the glamorous facade. Now, let's debunk another myth. The idea that artisans lived in secluded solitude, isolated from the rest of society. In reality, you're part of a vibrant community, a bustling hive of creativity and collaboration. The artisan guilds we've mentioned before, they're your lifeline, offering not just support, but also a network of fellow craftsmen who share your passion and your struggles. It's like being part of an ancient LinkedIn, minus the unsolicited endorsements. And here's a nugget of truth that hits hard. Despite the cultural significance of your work, life as an artisan isn't always a bed of roses. The economic pressures are real, and the competition is fierce. You're constantly honing your skills, not just to keep up with the trends, but to ensure your place in the market. One misstep, one subpar piece, and your reputation could take a hit. It's a balancing act of creativity and commerce, where every creation is a gamble. But amidst the pressures and the politics, there's a sense of pride in what you do. You're not just creating objects, you're crafting legacies, pieces that tell the story of a civilization. From the grandest temple mask to the tiniest bead, your work is a testament to the ingenuity and artistry of the Maya. It's a reminder that even in the midst of economic calculations and social machinations, there's beauty in creation. As the afternoon light casts long shadows across Tikal, you pause for a moment, tools in hand. The rhythm of your work is a dance, a melody that echoes through the ages. This isn't just a job, it's a calling, a chance to leave your mark on history, one chisel stroke at a time. And while the myths may paint a picture of divine artistry, the reality is far more complex and far more human. You, my friend, are not just an artisan, you're a storyteller, weaving the narrative of Tikal into every piece you create. And so, as the sun dips below the horizon, casting its final warm hues over the sprawling metropolis of Tikal, let's turn our gaze to the enduring legacy of the artisans who once walked its stone-carved streets. Because, let's face it, your work wasn't just a flash in the pan of history, it was a seismic tremor that rippled through time. Archaeologists, those modern-day detectives who piece together stories from shards and dust, have unearthed treasures that speak volumes about your influence. Start with the basics. Those ceremonial masks and intricate jewelry pieces you laboured over in your workshop weren't just left to gather dust. No, they were discovered in tombs and sacred sites, whispering tales of their past lives. Finding a jade mask buried alongside a ruler is like unearthing the crown jewels in an Egyptian pyramid. It's a big deal. These artifacts serve as time capsules, offering glimpses into the lives of the elite who once sported your creations as badges of power. Archaeological digs have revealed that your artistic flair wasn't just confined to Tikal. Pieces bearing your style have been found miles away, scattered across the Maya world. It's like discovering a Picasso in a New York garage sale, unexpected yet thrilling. This wide distribution speaks to the far-reaching impact of your craft, a testament to the trade networks and cultural exchanges that defined the era. Your work didn't just stay home, it travelled, spreading influence like ancient cultural ambassadors. Now, let's talk modern interpretations. There's a tendency today to romanticize the life of a Maya artisan, painting it as a serene existence filled with divine inspiration and leisurely creativity. It's a comforting narrative, one that lets us imagine a world where art was a spiritual calling rather than a grueling occupation. But while it's nice to think of you as a mystical figure, the reality was far less mystical and far more mundane. You were part artist, part entrepreneur, navigating the pressures of supply and demand, all while keeping an eye on the ever-looming guild politics. In other words, you were living the gig economy life before it was cool. But here's the kicker. Even though romantic notions are often exaggerated, they're not entirely off base. Artisans like you did create with a sense of purpose that transcended the mere act of crafting. Your work was a bridge between the material and the spiritual, a conduit for the stories and beliefs of your people. It's a legacy that echoes through the ages, even if the day-to-day grind was more sweat than sanctity. Fast forward to today, and it's clear that the influence of your craft hasn't faded into oblivion. Contemporary Mesoamerican artists often draw inspiration from the patterns and techniques of the ancient Maya. You see it in the geometric designs of modern textiles, the intricate carvings in jewelry, and even in the way artists today interpret themes of nature and mythology. The past, it seems, never really lets go of the present. In fact, the resurgence of interest in ancient techniques has led to a revival of sorts. Artists and historians alike are delving into the archives, trying to replicate the methods you perfected centuries ago. It's like a culinary renaissance. Only instead of rediscovering sourdough, they're bringing back the art of pressure flaking and jade polishing. There's a certain satisfaction in seeing ancient skills valued anew, in watching as they're adapted and transformed in the hands of modern creators. And there you have it. The full arc of a day in the life of a 9th century Tikal artisan, brought to life through archaeological discovery and modern-day reinterpretation. It's a story that's as much about human ingenuity as it is about the enduring appeal of beautifully crafted objects. From the bustling markets of Tikal to the quiet solitude of your workshop, your legacy lives on, a testament to the power of art to transcend time and space. As night descends upon Tikal, the city slowly fades into the shadows. The echoes of chisels and the whispers of trade deals long past may have quieted, but the impact of your work continues to resonate. Whether it's through a jade pendant unearthed from the earth, or a contemporary piece inspired by your legacy, your artistry still speaks, bridging the gap between ancient and modern, reminding us all of the enduring power of human creativity. So here's to you, the artisans of Tikal, masters of craft, storytellers of stone whose mark on history is as indelible as the carvings you left behind. In the grand narrative of ancient Egypt, Akhenaten stands out like a pharaoh at a monotheistic rave, shaking up the status quo with all the subtlety of a pyramid landing on a sand dune. Around 1353 BC, this radical ruler took the throne of the new kingdom, a time when Egypt was the height of sophistication and religious fervour, complete with a pantheon of gods so extensive it made the Greek gods look like a small family reunion. Akhenaten, however, had a bold new vision. Why not ditch the divine chaos and focus on one god only? And thus began the short-lived yet incredibly disruptive chapter of Atonism. Now, there's something you should know about Akhenaten. This guy was not your run-of-the-mill pharaoh. For starters, he was born Amenhotep IV, a perfectly respectable name with a perfectly respectable lineage. His father, Amenhotep III, had kept the religious peace by playing nice with Amun, the big cheese of Egyptian gods. But Junior had other plans. He turned his back on Amun faster than a Nile crocodile on an unsuspecting duck, promoting Aten, the sun disk. Aten wasn't just a minor player in the celestial lineup, he was the cosmic VIP, and Akhenaten was his most enthusiastic publicist. The new kingdom era was a time of great prosperity, and Egypt was the ancient equivalent of a global superpower. The economy was booming thanks to fertile lands and the bustling trade networks that stretched from the Levant to Nubia. But, unlike his predecessors who were content to bask in the status quo, Akhenaten thought he'd try his hand at divine innovation. So, he decided to relocate the capital to a brand new city called Akhenaten, known today as Amarna. Imagine the expense reports on that move. Some estimates suggest it took around 20,000 workers and several years to construct this purpose-built city in the middle of nowhere. Talk about a grandiose housewarming party. Akhenaten's religious reforms were as subtle as a sledgehammer. He closed temples dedicated to other gods, particularly those of Amun, and redirected their wealth and resources to his beloved Aten. This was a move that likely earned him the ire of the powerful priesthood, who were used to being the puppet masters behind the gilded curtain. But hey, nothing like a little monotheism to shake things up, right? Akhenaten's vision of Aten was all about sunlight and purity, a cosmic force that was supposed to be accessible to everyone, but mainly through him, of course. After all, what's a religious reform without a little self-aggrandizement? While the romantic notion of a pharaoh leading a spiritual awakening might sound compelling, the reality was far less divine. Akhenaten's reforms caused economic and social upheaval. The closure of temples meant job losses for thousands of priests, artisans, and laborers who were dependent on the religious industry. Imagine trying to explain that to an ancient Egyptian career counselor. So, I see you've got 10 years of experience as an Amun priest. Any other skills? Now, let's talk about Akhenaten's physical appearance, which has been the subject of much speculation and artistic license. In sculptures and carvings, he's often depicted with elongated features, a protruding belly, and wide hips. Some historians have suggested he might have had a genetic disorder like Marfan syndrome. Others think it was just an artistic style to emphasize his divine connection to Aten. Either way, he probably wouldn't have made the cover of GQ Ancient Egypt, but he was definitely memorable. The shift from a polytheistic to a monotheistic society wasn't just a matter of spiritual preference. It was a political gamble that would make even the boldest modern-day politicians break out in a nervous sweat. By centralizing religious power, Akhenaten was attempting to consolidate control and diminish the influence of the priesthood of Amun, who were essentially the ancient world's version of a powerful lobby group. But like any good political maneuver, it came with risks. You see, the people loved their gods, and the priests loved their power. Messing with that balance was akin to rearranging the deck chairs on a sinking ship. And what about the everyday Egyptians? Well, they were probably more concerned with the price of grain and the annual flooding of the Nile than which deity was at the top of the divine leaderboard. But even they would have felt the impact of Akhenaten's reforms. The shift to monotheism was like telling a nation of football fans that their beloved sport was now illegal and everyone should start playing tennis instead. Confusing, unsettling, and not particularly popular. Despite the upheaval, Akhenaten stuck to his celestial guns. He composed hymns, such as the great hymn to Aten, which waxed lyrical about his sun god's benevolence and power. It's one of the few pieces of writing we have from his reign, and it gives us a glimpse into the religious fervor that drove his reforms. In his mind, Aten wasn't just a god, he was the god, lighting up the universe with divine wisdom and warmth. Whether this was a genuine spiritual awakening or an elaborate power play is still up for debate. As for Akhenaten himself, he was a bit of a mixed bag. Some accounts suggest he was an idealist, trying to usher in a new era of religious purity and enlightenment. Others paint him as a despot who was more interested in control than cosmic harmony. Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. Akhenaten's reign was a roller coaster of religious reform, political intrigue, and economic disruption. His legacy, much like the desert city he built, is a testament to the wild ambitions of a pharaoh who dared to dream big and pay the cosmic price for it. And so, with the audacity of a pharaoh who fancied himself the next big thing since the invention of papyrus, Akhenaten embarked on his most ambitious project yet, the birth of Akhenaten, or, as we modern mortals know it, Amarna. Think of it as the ancient world's equivalent of building a tech startup in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Out of nowhere, literally and figuratively, he decided to plant his city of light smack dab in the middle of a barren stretch of land about 200 miles north of Thebes, far from the traditional power hubs of Egypt. This was no leisurely stroll across the Nile. It was a logistical nightmare, a Herculean task that would have put even the most seasoned project managers into a cold sweat. First off, let's talk numbers. Estimates suggest that it took around 20,000 workers several years to construct Akhenaten. That's right, 20,000 souls toiling away under the relentless Egyptian sun, armed with little more than chisels, determination, and the occasional shade of a palm tree. And what did they build? A sprawling urban sprawl complete with temples, palaces, and residential areas, all ceremoniously dedicated to Aten, the sun disk. But here's the kicker. The bill for this grand urban renewal project was astronomical. The cost of labour, materials, and logistics would have been enough to make even the wealthiest of pharaohs think twice. But Akhenaten was not your typical pharaoh. He was the kind of guy who saw a sunbeam and thought, why not build a whole city around it? Now, you might wonder why Akhenaten chose such a remote location for his new capital. Surely there were more convenient places to set up shop? Well, here's the thing. Akhenaten wasn't just about geographical isolation, it was about ideological separation. By moving away from Thebes and its politically entrenched priesthood, Akhenaten was making a bold statement. He was essentially saying, out with the old, in with the sun. He wanted a clean slate, a place where he could worship Aten without interference from the Amun-loving priests who were as keen on change as a cat is on a bath. But, as with any grand vision, there were consequences. The distance from traditional power centres meant that the city was isolated, not just geographically, but politically. It was like trying to run a country from a cabin in the woods with a spotty Wi-Fi connection. This didn't exactly help Akhenaten's popularity with the rest of Egypt. The move might have been a symbolic gesture of religious purity, but it also alienated influential factions that had been the backbone of Egyptian stability for centuries. Imagine trying to run a government where your key advisors are several days' travel away, all while overseeing a major religious and economic transformation. Not exactly a recipe for smooth governance. The city's strategic location, or lack thereof, also posed economic challenges. Supply lines had to stretch across miles of desert, making it a logistical headache on par with organizing a music festival on Mars. Everything from food to building supplies had to be brought in, creating a dependency that was as precarious as it was costly. Sure, Akhenaten had a vision, but no vision is immune to the hard truths of logistics and economics. Picture this, a bustling city in the desert with traders and workers constantly on the move, trying to keep the wheel of Aten's dream turning. It was a city built on sunlight and ambition, but not exactly on practicality. And let's not forget the local workforce. These were people who had to adapt to a new way of life practically overnight. Many were uprooted from their homes and thrust into a new environment, tasked with building a city that, while magnificent, was also a monument to one man's religious fervour. The city's rapid construction led to cramped living conditions and a lack of infrastructure, making life in the city less of a utopian dream and more of a daily grind. It was an urban planner's nightmare, with the kind of haphazard layout that would make any modern city official weep into their zoning regulations. Despite these challenges, Akhenaten stood as a testament to Akhenaten's religious revolution. It was a city that embodied his devotion to Aten, a physical manifestation of his spiritual and political aspirations. The architecture and art of Amarna broke away from traditional Egyptian styles, opting instead for a more naturalistic and relaxed approach. Scenes of the royal family and intimate, everyday moments were common, an unprecedented move in the rigid and formal world of Egyptian art. It was as if Akhenaten wanted to say, "Look, we're just like you, only with a really, really big palace." But for all its grandeur and symbolism, Akhenaten was a city at odds with itself. It was a beacon of religious innovation shackled by economic and logistical constraints. The reality was that while the city shone brightly under Aten's sun, its foundations were precarious, built on the shifting sands of political isolation and economic strain. The distance from Egypt's traditional heartland meant that Akhenaten's dream city was as much a symbol of separation as it was of new beginnings. So, was Akhenaten's grand experiment in urban planning a success or a folly? The answer, much like the sun itself, is a matter of perspective. To his followers, it might have seemed like a courageous leap into a brighter future. To his detractors, it was a reckless gamble, a costly distraction from the real issues at hand. And to the workers and residents of Akhenaten, it was likely a bit of both, a city of light that cast long shadows. As the sun set over the desert city, Akhenaten remained committed to his vision, undeterred by the challenges that lay ahead. His city was a testament to his unwavering belief in Aten's divine light, but as history would later reveal, even the brightest of dreams can be eclipsed by the realities of the world. The story of Akhenaten was far from over, and as the city continued to grow under the watchful gaze of its pharaoh, the seeds of its eventual fate were quietly being sown. But that, dear listener, is a tale for another time. As the sun dipped below the horizon of Akhenaten, Akhenaten's vision hung in the balance like a precarious chandelier over a dance floor. The grandeur of a city hewn from the sands was undeniable, yet the societal and economic undercurrents swirling beneath its foundations threatened to pull it under faster than a crocodile in the Nile. You see, Akhenaten's religious shake-up, while revolutionary, had all the subtlety of a hippo in a porcelain shop. His temple closures weren't just about promoting Aten. They were a seismic shift that sent shockwaves through the entire Egyptian economy. Let's start with the priestly class. Before Akhenaten's divine monopoly, the priesthood was the ancient equivalent of Wall Street brokers, wielding power and wealth with the assurance of a cat at a mouse convention. The temples of Amun, in particular, were the economic titans of their time, receiving generous donations that would make even modern hedge fund managers green with envy. In fact, some temples had amassed vast tracts of land, generating income that bolstered both religious and state coffers. Enter Akhenaten, with his sun-drenched zealotry, shutting these powerhouse temples faster than a pharaoh can say monotheism. It's estimated that the Temple of Amun alone controlled over a third of Egypt's arable land at the height of its power. That's no small change. With the closures, thousands of priests, along with the artisans, labourers and traders who orbited their influence, found themselves in a sudden career crisis. It was as if the CEO of a major corporation had abruptly decided to turn the company into a lemonade stand. The economic consequences were staggering. The state had previously benefited from the temple's wealth, as donations often took the form of goods, land and labour, a trifecta that maintained Egypt's prosperity. When Akhenaten redirected resources to Aten, the shift was akin to diverting a river. The flow changed, but the drought it left behind was felt far and wide. The treasury was soon tighter than a mummy's bandages, and the ripple effects touched every echelon of society. And let's not forget the social implications. The priesthood wasn't just a religious institution, it was a vital cog in the socio-political machinery of ancient Egypt. These were men who held sway over both the spiritual and secular realms, acting as intermediaries between the divine and the mortal. By sidelining them, Akhenaten didn't just disrupt the economy, he upended a societal structure that had been as stable as the pyramids themselves. The common folk, meanwhile, found themselves caught in the crossfire of this celestial tug-of-war. For centuries, they had relied on the temples for more than just spiritual guidance. Temples were centers of education, healthcare, and social welfare. They were the community hubs where people gathered, learned, and found support. With the closures, these services evaporated faster than water in the desert sun, leaving a void that was felt acutely by ordinary Egyptians. As for the economy, well, it was on a roller coaster ride without seatbelts. The closure of temples meant a significant loss in state revenue, forcing Akhenaten to find alternative sources of income. Taxation became more aggressive, and the burden fell primarily on the working class and farmers, who were already stretched thin. The financial strain was palpable, like trying to squeeze wine from a grapevine that had long since withered. But Akhenaten, ever the eternal optimist, or perhaps the stubborn idealist, ploughed on. His reign was marked by a fervent devotion to Aten, but also by a stubborn refusal to acknowledge the mounting economic pressures. He composed hymns and built temples in Amarna with a zeal that bordered on fanaticism, even as the rest of Egypt experienced economic contraction. It was a bit like throwing a lavish party while the house was on fire, a spectacle of grandiosity amid impending doom. The balance of power, once a delicate equilibrium between the pharaoh and the priesthood, had been decisively tilted. Akhenaten's reforms centralized authority under his rule, sidelining the priests and reconfiguring the power dynamics of the time. But as any seasoned chess player knows, eliminating your opponent's pieces doesn't guarantee victory if your own position is compromised. In the end, Akhenaten's economic and social reforms were a double-edged sword. They were bold and ambitious, but also reckless and destabilizing. His vision for a monotheistic utopia clashed with the harsh realities of economic pragmatism and social continuity. As he gazed upon his desert city, radiant under Aten's gaze, he may have seen a beacon of divine truth. But for many Egyptians, it was a dawn fraught with uncertainty and disruption. So, what do we make of the Sun King's reforms? Were they the misguided dreams of an idealist, or the calculated moves of a ruler seeking to cement his legacy? As with most things in history, the truth lies somewhere in between. Akhenaten's legacy is as complex as the myriad hieroglyphs that tell his story, a tapestry of religious fervor, economic upheaval, and social transformation. And as the sun set over Amarna, casting long shadows over its unfinished temples and bustling streets, the seeds of its eventual fate were quietly taking root. Yet, for all the turmoil, Akhenaten's story was far from over. The echoes of his reign would continue to reverberate through the annals of history, leaving an indelible mark on the sands of time. But that, dear listener, is a tale that will unfold in the chapters yet to come. As the sun dipped behind the dunes, casting its final golden glow over Amarna, we turn our gaze to a different kind of luminary, Queen Nefertiti. Now, if Akhenaten was the rock star pharaoh of ancient Egypt, Nefertiti was undoubtedly his lead guitarist, commanding attention, admiration, and a fair share of intrigue. Famous for her beauty, immortalized in that iconic bust with cheekbones sharp enough to cut papyrus, she played a crucial role in Akhenaten's reign. But let's not get too carried away by her perfectly symmetrical visage. Behind the allure was a woman whose influence at court was as strategic as it was profound. Nefertiti wasn't just a pretty face. She was Akhenaten's partner in both life and reform. Together, they were the Brangelina of the 14th century BC, minus the tabloids, but with plenty of political drama. She was often depicted alongside Akhenaten in public ceremonies and religious rituals, a visual testament to their joint authority. Unlike the typically reserved role of a queen, she was portrayed participating actively in religious worship, offering to Aten with the same fervor as her husband. This was no wallflower of a queen. She was a co-ruler, and her prominence in artistic depictions suggests she wielded real power. Now, let's bust a myth or two. Popular imagination has often painted their marriage as the epitome of ancient romance. Sure, they were frequently shown in affectionate poses, but context is key. These images were more than just snapshots of marital bliss, they were propaganda. By presenting a united front, Akhenaten and Nefertiti were reinforcing the legitimacy of their religious reforms. It was like the ancient equivalent of a royal Instagram feed, curated to perfection, with each depiction carrying a subtext of divine right and harmony. Their family life, however, was anything but idyllic. Akhenaten and Nefertiti had 6 daughters, which, in the patriarchal world of ancient Egypt, presented a bit of a dynastic dilemma. You see, having a male heir was the golden ticket to a smooth succession. Without a son, the future of the new religious and political order Akhenaten was trying to establish was as uncertain as the Nile's annual flooding. This lack of a male successor was a problem that lurked behind the scenes, casting a long shadow over Akhenaten's ambitious plans. And speaking of family dynamics, let's not forget about the rest of the royal entourage. Akhenaten's son, Tutankhaten, later known as Tutankhamun, was born to one of his secondary wives, Kia. Now, Kia's role is shrouded in mystery, much like the fate of socks that enter the laundry basket but never return. She was a favoured wife, but her influence waned as quickly as it rose, leaving behind little more than fragmented references and some tantalizing artifacts. In the midst of all this royal drama, succession issues loomed large. Imagine the palace whispers, the courtiers trying to divine the future like ancient soothsayers. With no clear heir from Nefertiti, the line of succession was about as straightforward as a hieroglyphic crossword puzzle. The tension was palpable, and the stakes were high. After all, whoever followed Akhenaten would inherit not just a kingdom, but a religious revolution in progress, a kingdom rebuilt on the sun-soaked sands of Aten's ideology. Now, let's divert our gaze to a bit of palace intrigue and gossip, shall we? Court life was as complex as the Egyptian pantheon Akhenaten had tried to simplify. The royal family had its quirks, and Akhenaten was known for some eccentricities that would have made even the most seasoned courtier raise an eyebrow. For one, he was quite the hymn enthusiast, composing poetic tributes to Aten that would be the equivalent of a modern-day mixtape, if mixtapes were about solar deities. Nefertiti, on the other hand, was the consummate diplomat. She was likely involved in managing the court and interacting with foreign dignitaries. Her name, which means the beautiful one has come, wasn't just a nod to her looks, but a testament to her role as the face of Akhenaten's new religion. She was the poster queen for Atenism, and her presence was as much a political statement as it was a personal one. Yet, beneath the surface of this seemingly glamorous life, the cracks were beginning to show. The pressure of maintaining the religious reform, coupled with the personal stakes of a stable succession plan, weighed heavily on the royal couple. It was hard enough to run a kingdom. Running one while navigating the treacherous waters of court politics and familial expectations was a Herculean task. And let's not forget the economic strain that was already beginning to fray the edges of Akhenaten's utopian tapestry. So, what can we glean from this royal soap opera? Well, for one, the romanticized image of Akhenaten and Nefertiti as the perfect power couple is just that, a romanticization. Their partnership was strategic, their public displays of harmony carefully crafted to support their religious and political agenda. And while their legacy may be enshrined in the monumental city of Amarna, the reality was far from the idyllic vision they sought to project. Their story is a fascinating blend of ambition, faith, and the ever-present shadow of mortality. A reminder that even the most powerful rulers are subject to the whims of fate and the constraints of human nature. As the sun rose and set over Amarna, casting its golden light on the city and its inhabitants, the echoes of Akhenaten and Nefertiti's reign continued to reverberate, shaping the course of Egyptian history in ways they could never have imagined. And with that, dear listener, we find ourselves on the cusp of the next chapter in our tale, a chapter where the weight of Akhenaten's reforms and the uncertainty of succession will collide in ways that are as unpredictable as they are inevitable. But that's a story for another day, one that promises even more intrigue, upheaval, and perhaps a touch of redemption in the annals of history. As we pivot from the golden mirage of Akhenaten's dream, reality comes crashing down like a sandstorm on a tourist's beach day. Egypt, weary of its monotheistic detour, was ready to hit the reset button, and hard. Following Akhenaten's death in 1336 BC, the pendulum swung back with the force of a pharaoh's decree. The return to polytheism was swift and decisive, like a cosmic boomerang finding its way home. Akhenaten's successor and son-in-law, Tutankhaten, didn't just change his name to Tutankhamun for the heck of it. No, he was aligning himself with the old ways and the god Amun, effectively erasing the Aten era from the record books. Talk about a PR pivot. Tutankhamun, or King Tut, as he's affectionately known in the modern age, was a young boy thrust into the eye of this cultural hurricane. His advisors, eager to restore order and traditional reverence, guided him back to Thebes, the ancient heart of Egypt's spiritual and political life. Imagine a boardroom meeting in which executives decide to scrap the entire company rebrand because, well, it tanked the stock. That's essentially what happened here. Temples to Amun were reopened, their priests were reinstated, and suddenly the Aten worship was yesterday's news, as relevant as last season's fashion in a world where style was dictated by divine favor. The political cleanup was as thorough as it was ruthless. Akhenaten's name and likeness were systematically chiseled out of monuments, his city of Amarna abandoned faster than a sinking ship. This wasn't just a change of heart. It was a full-blown cultural erasure, a medieval control plus alt plus delete. The erasure was so effective that for centuries Akhenaten was known only as the heretic king, his memory surviving more as a cautionary tale than a chapter in the royal annals. The priests of Amun, who had been sidelined and stripped of their power, were back with a vengeance, and their influence was stronger than ever. They were like the comeback kid of Egyptian religious politics, and they were playing for keeps. The economic scene had to be salvaged too, because an empire doesn't run on ideology alone. The old alliances were restored, trade routes were re-established, and the temples, once the lifeblood of Egypt's economy, resumed their role as economic powerhouses. The priesthood, with its vast land holdings and resources, once again became a crucial component of the state's wealth. In a way, it was a return to the status quo, the kind of stability that had ensured Egypt's prosperity for centuries. The grand experiment of monotheism, while briefly electrifying, had cost the nation dearly in terms of economic stability and political cohesion. And what of Akhenaten's city, the grand Akhenaten? Well, it became a ghost town. Its stones scavenged for other building projects, its once bustling streets left to be reclaimed by the desert. The city that was supposed to be a beacon of religious innovation became a cautionary tale of hubris, a monument not to divine light, but to the impermanence of human ambition. It's a bit like building a skyscraper only to have it condemned before it's ever fully occupied. The sands of Amarna, once the stage for Akhenaten's sunlit dreams, buried those dreams with the inexorable passage of time. In the grand tapestry of Egyptian history, what do we make of this Sun King and his ephemeral city? Akhenaten's reign was a fascinating interlude, a bold, if misguided, attempt to redefine spirituality and governance. His reforms, while ambitious, were ultimately unsustainable, lacking the economic and political foundations necessary to support such a radical shift. The return to polytheism underscored the resilience of Egypt's traditional structures, the enduring power of its priesthood, and the deep roots of its polytheistic culture. Yet, despite his vilification, Akhenaten's legacy persists in the annals of history. He was a visionary who dared to dream differently, even if his vision was out of step with the world around him. His experiment in monotheism was an audacious challenge to the status quo, a reminder of the complex interplay between power, faith, and tradition. It's a tale that resonates with the timeless dance of innovation and conservatism, a story as old as civilization itself. And let's not forget the enigmatic figure of Nefertiti, whose influence and mystery continue to captivate even today. Her role in the Amarna period is a testament to the power of female leadership in a time and place where such power was often obscured. She remains an icon of beauty and strength, a symbol of the enduring allure of ancient Egypt. As the sun sets on this chapter of history, we find ourselves reflecting on the broader implications of Akhenaten's reign. It's a reminder that history is not just a series of events, but a complex web of human ambition, belief, and consequence. Akhenaten's story is a cautionary tale about the perils of unchecked vision, the fragility of human constructs in the face of tradition, and the enduring legacy of those who dare to challenge the norm. In the grand scheme of things, the heretic king's brief blaze of glory serves as a poignant reminder of the tenuous balance between innovation and tradition, a balance that civilizations have walked for millennia. As we close the book on Akhenaten and his sun-drenched dreams, we are left with the enduring lesson that while the sands of time may shift, the echoes of history continue to shape our understanding of the past, illuminating the path forward with the light of lessons learned. In a world where most people couldn't find their way out of a paper bag without Google Maps, imagine setting sail in a canoe across the Pacific Ocean with about as much certainty as a game of pin the tail on the donkey. Yet, thousands of years ago, that's exactly what the Austronesians did. These early maritime pioneers left Taiwan around 3000 BCE, embarking on voyages that would make any modern-day explorer's hair stand on end. Let's set the scene. It's the tail end of the Neolithic period. Humans are getting the hang of this whole farming thing, and some folks are starting to settle down. But not the Austronesians. Oh no, they had other plans that involved hopping into slender canoes and paddling into the great unknown. Why, you ask? Perhaps they were driven by an insatiable desire for adventure. Or maybe they just heard there were really great fishing spots on the other side of the horizon. Now, these weren't your average Sunday paddlers. The Austronesians were armed with cutting-edge technology of the time, outrigger canoes. Picture a sleek vessel, stable as a cat on a hot tin roof, designed to glide over the waves with the grace of a swan, if swans were known for their oceanic prowess. This ingenious design allowed them to cover mind-boggling distances, sometimes over 5,000 kilometers, which is roughly like paddling from Los Angeles to Hawaii and then deciding to just keep going. But did they actually know where they were heading, or were they just the ancient world's biggest fans of the open water surprise? Historical evidence suggests they were no aimless wanderers. These navigators used advanced star maps, wind patterns, and ocean currents to guide their journeys. skills that would make even the most seasoned modern sailor break into a sweat. And talk about a long-range plan. Over the centuries, they colonized a vast stretch of the globe, reaching as far as Madagascar to the west and Easter Island to the east. Despite their astounding navigational skills, life on these canoes wasn't all sunsets and sea breezes. Imagine the reality: cramped quarters, limited supplies, and the ever-present danger of storms. It was less a pleasure cruise and more a survival course on steroids. There was no room for the faint-hearted or seasick. So, what exactly drove these people to abandon the comforts of home for the uncertainty of the open sea? Archaeologists and historians continue to debate. Some suggest it was the allure of new lands and resources. Others propose social or environmental pressures back in Taiwan may have nudged them out of their nests. Let's not forget the possibly universal human desire to just get away from the neighbors once in a while. As they ventured forth, the Austronesians didn't just spread their physical presence, but also their culture and language. They were the original influencers, if you will. Their language family, the Austronesian languages, now covers an area that includes Madagascar, New Zealand, and Hawaii. That's a linguistic footprint that would make even the most seasoned polyglot blush. In essence, the journey of the Austronesians is a tale of daring and determination. These were folks who looked at the horizon and saw not a limit, but an invitation. They remind us of the human spirit's relentless curiosity, the kind that drives someone to say, sure, why not, to a journey that could end up anywhere from blissful paradise to nowhere. And perhaps in their story we find a reflection of our own ceaseless quest to explore, adapt, and thrive, no matter the odds. So, just as our Austronesian friends were getting cozy with the waves, they added another chapter to their saga, the second wave of expansion. Picture this. If your mental map extends beyond the edge of your smartphone screen, you've got the Philippines, Indonesia, and even farther reaches like a historical game of Risk. Minus the dice and the inevitable family arguments. This wasn't just about planting flags and claiming territory, though. It was a high-stakes chess match played on the open sea, and the Austronesians were the grandmasters. Let's talk about their navigational prowess, shall we? Forget those quaint Hollywood-esque images of starry-eyed mariners gazing at the night sky, purely for its poetic beauty. No, these folks were all business. The stars were their GPS and survival guide rolled into one. By observing the heavens, they learned to read more than just constellations. They deciphered the dance of the stars to calculate latitude and learned the subtle art of interpreting ocean swells and wind directions. It was less about romance and more about not ending up as a footnote in history, a very wet, very forgotten footnote. And while it's tempting to imagine them as lone wolves, paddling bravely into the unknown, the truth is, these expeditions were as coordinated as a military operation. The Austronesians weren't just winging it. They were strategizing, adapting, and planning like seasoned tacticians. They understood that survival and success depended on preparation and collaboration, not just blind luck. As they expanded into regions like the Philippines and Indonesia, they brought with them not only their navigational skills but also a keen sense of trade. Because let's face it, you can only live off of coconuts and fish for so long before you start craving something with a bit more zing. Enter obsidian and spices, a pair that makes peanut butter and jelly look like an afterthought. Obsidian, with its sharp edges and sleek, glass-like finish, was the ancient equivalent of the Swiss army knife. It was crucial for tools and weapons, and its value was recognized across cultures. And spices? Well, spices were the bling of the prehistoric world. Nutmeg and cloves from the Moluccas were like the Bitcoin of their time, offering a taste of the exotic and the promise of wealth. Trade routes were the lifeblood of these expansive journeys. The Austronesians were the original barter kings, turning remote islands into bustling trade hubs. They understood the economic necessity of exchange long before anyone thought to invent currency. Their trading network stretched over thousands of miles, connecting disparate cultures and creating a web of commerce that laid the groundwork for future civilizations. This was no casual market day. It was a complex economy in the making. But let's not sugarcoat it. Life on the trade routes wasn't exactly a luxury cruise. It was more like a series of endurance challenges on a reality TV show, minus the cameras. Navigating these waters demanded not only skill, but also a healthy dose of grit and determination. The stakes were high, and the consequences of failure could be dire. Yet, the Austronesians thrived because they saw opportunity where others might see only obstacles. And let's pause a moment for a reality check. These voyages were not without their struggles and failures. Ships were lost, lives were endangered, and not every expedition ended in triumph. The romantic notion of the fearless explorer often glosses over the harsh realities of the sea, the storms that could capsize even the sturdiest vessel, the threat of hostile encounters, and the simple, relentless challenge of survival in an unforgiving environment. But in the face of these hardships, the Austronesians persisted, driven by a combination of necessity and an insatiable curiosity about what lay beyond the horizon. Their expansion into the Philippines and Indonesia wasn't just about land acquisition, it was about creating a network of interaction and exchange that would shape the cultural and economic landscape of the region for centuries to come. There were less conquerors and more connectors, weaving together a tapestry of humanity that would endure long after their canoes had been replaced by more modern means of transportation. And so, as we sail into the next chapter of this epic tale, we find ourselves not at an end, but at a beginning that would see the Austronesians continue to push the boundaries of their world, driven by a spirit of exploration and a talent for innovation that would leave an indelible mark on history. Stay tuned, because the adventure is far from over. And so, our Austronesian saga sails forth, propelled not by the wind, but by the force of relentless human ingenuity. These pioneers weren't just navigating the seas, they were charting the complex waters of social and political organization. As they landed on the islands of Southeast Asia and beyond, they didn't just slap a home sweet home sign on the nearest coconut tree, they built societies. Let's start with the basics. When the Austronesians hit these tropical shores, they weren't greeted with a welcoming committee and a parade. Nope, they had to figure things out from scratch. These early communities were less about hierarchy and more about survival. The first settlers likely organized themselves into small, kin-based groups. Think of it as a family road trip, but with more outrigger canoes and fewer rest stops. Yet, as populations grew, so did the need for more structured governance. Enter the chiefdoms. These were not merry bands of egalitarian beachcombers sharing coconuts and singing kumbaya. Instead, they were stratified societies where power dynamics played out in real time. Chiefs held sway, not just by virtue of their charisma or impressive shell necklace collections, but through control of resources and trade networks. A chief's influence was often measured by his ability to secure goods like obsidian, spices, or those all-important pigs. Because let's be real, nothing says power like having the most bacon. And here's where we need to smash the myth of the noble savage. You know, the romantic notion that these early societies were idyllic utopias, free from conflict and corruption. Spoiler alert, humans are humans, whether they're in a boardroom or on a beach. Sure, there was cooperation, but there was also competition, and sometimes things got messy. In reality, these societies were as politically savvy as they were resourceful. Alliances were forged and broken, and power was something to be negotiated, not assumed. Interestingly, among the Austronesians, power wasn't purely hereditary. While dynastic rule was certainly a thing, leadership often required proving one's mettle. Chiefs needed to be shrewd negotiators, capable warriors, and savvy traders. They had to keep the peace and ensure their community thrived in a precarious balance of power and resources. It was less about divine right and more about pragmatic survival. Economics played a starring role in this power drama. Trade wasn't just a way to get your hands on the latest must-have items. It was the lifeblood of these communities. A chief's ability to manage and expand trade networks could make or break his reign. The Austronesians were adept at turning the scattered islands into a thriving web of commerce. Picture a bustling market day, sans the haggling over coconut prices, but with obsidian blades and aromatic spices changing hands faster than you can say economic powerhouse. Of course, where there's trade, there's also conflict. Not every interaction was a friendly exchange of goods and pleasantries. Sometimes disputes arose over territory or resources, and these could escalate into skirmishes or even outright warfare. But before you imagine epic battles fit for a blockbuster movie, reel it back a bit. Warfare in these societies was often more about strategic raids and demonstrations of power than all-out destruction. Battles might be fought over fishing rights or the control of a particularly valuable grove of coconut trees, because when you're on an island, coconuts are serious business. And let's not forget about the ever-present threat of external forces. The Austronesians weren't the only players in the region. Other cultures and tribes, like the Melanesians, also had stakes in the game. Diplomatic relations had to be managed with the finesse of a modern-day diplomat, albeit with fewer press conferences and more face-to-face negotiations. As societies grew more complex, so did their political structures. Eventually, some chiefdoms evolved into more centralized states, with elaborate hierarchies and bureaucracies that would make even the most ardent fan of office politics blush. These were not static societies. They were dynamic, adapting to the challenges and opportunities of their environment. They laid the groundwork for the polities that would later define the region, such as the powerful kingdoms of Srivijaya and Majapahit, but more on them later. In the end, the story of Austronesian social and political organization is a testament to human adaptability and resilience. These were people who looked at a series of isolated islands and saw not barriers, but opportunities. They remind us that society is a living, breathing entity, constantly evolving, shaped by the tides of human ambition and the currents of economic necessity. So, as we close this chapter, remember this. The Austronesians were more than just seafaring adventurers. They were architects of complex societies, masters of diplomacy, and pioneers of trade. Their legacy is etched not just in the sands of the islands they settled, but in the cultural and political landscapes they helped to create. And the journey? Oh, it's far from over. There are still new shores to explore and stories to uncover, so hold tight as we continue this voyage through history's vast, uncharted waters. With the Austronesians, life was a blend of calculated risk and relentless curiosity, a balancing act between survival and exploration. Now, as we dive into the next part of their saga, let's talk cultural exchanges and those nifty technological tricks they packed in their metaphorical toolkit. We're not just talking about swapping coconuts for obsidian, we're talking about a cultural mashup that would make a DJ jealous. First off, let's tackle the language spread. The Austronesian language family is like the linguistic equivalent of a viral video that never stops trending. From Madagascar in the west to Easter Island in the east, these languages tell a story of migration and adaptation. We're talking about a family of languages that today includes over 1,000 tongues. Imagine standing in a room with speakers of Hawaiian, Maori, and Malagasy, each one a linguistic thread in a tapestry spun across the sea. This isn't just about words, it's about identity and connection. Language is the original passport, allowing ideas, traditions, and innovations to travel alongside people. Now, let's talk about the Lapita culture, a name that sounds like a trendy cafe, but actually refers to an ancient people who were the Picasso of pottery. Around 1500 BCE, these folks were spreading their distinctive pottery style like it was going out of fashion, which it eventually did, but not before leaving a ceramic breadcrumb trail across the Pacific. They were the cultural bridge between the Austronesians and the Polynesians, linking the past with the future. Their pottery, decorated with intricate geometric patterns, was more than just kitchenware. It was a canvas for storytelling and symbolism. The Lapita were also agricultural innovators, bringing with them a starter pack of plants and animals that would transform island ecosystems. We're talking pigs, chickens, and taro essentials for island life and the original travel-sized farm. This wasn't just about sustenance, it was about reshaping landscapes and creating new ways of living. The Lapita were masters of adaptation, learning to make do with what each island offered while bringing their own flavors to the mix. But let's not get too carried away with the romantic notion of island paradises. The truth is, life in the Pacific wasn't all sandy beaches and coconut cocktails. Sure, the scenery was stunning, but living on an island came with its own set of challenges. Resources could be scarce, and survival often depended on meticulous planning and a deep understanding of the environment. Forget your Instagram-worthy sunsets. These folks were more concerned with where their next meal was coming from and how to stave off the occasional cyclone. And speaking of cyclones, let's have a reality check on the whole paradise thing. Imagine trying to eke out a living on a strip of land surrounded by ocean, where a bad storm could wipe out your food supply faster than you can say tropical getaway. This was no postcard-perfect existence. It was a constant battle against the elements, with occasional breaks for coconut harvesting. The romanticized view of island life often glosses over the harsh realities of isolation and vulnerability. Yet, the Austronesians and their Lapita descendants were nothing if not resilient. They developed sophisticated systems of resource management, understanding the delicate balance required to sustain life on small islands. This wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving in a challenging environment. They learned to fish sustainably, cultivate land efficiently, and build homes that could withstand nature's fury. Technological innovation was key to their success. Aside from their iconic outrigger canoes, which allowed them to conquer the Pacific, they also mastered the art of navigation without a compass or sextant. These were the original GPS navigators, using the stars, ocean swells, and wind patterns to chart their courses. This wasn't just an art, it was a science, honed over generations and passed down through oral tradition. It was a skill that demanded precision and an intimate knowledge of the natural world. In terms of cultural exchanges, the Austronesians were like the original networkers, connecting disparate island communities into a web of trade and communication. They weren't just trading goods, they were exchanging ideas, stories, and customs. This created a vibrant tapestry of island life, where diverse influences blended to form unique cultural identities. The Austronesians were cultural chameleons, adept at adapting to new environments while retaining their core traditions. As we continue to unravel the Austronesian story, it's clear that their legacy is one of innovation, resilience, and connection. They remind us that exploration isn't just about seeking new lands, it's about building bridges between people and ideas. So, as we prepare to dive into the next chapter, remember that the journey is as much about the people as it is about the places they encounter. In the Austronesian saga, every island is a new beginning, every voyage a testament to the human spirit's unyielding quest for discovery. Stay tuned, because the adventure is far from over. And speaking of continuing our journey, let's sail into the future, or at least the legacy of those incredible Austronesian voyages. These intrepid explorers didn't just leave behind a trail of outrigger canoes and star maps, they left an indelible mark on the Pacific cultures we know today. Imagine, if you will, the ripple effect of their journeys. It's like dropping a stone in a pond and watching the circles expand outward, touching everything in their path. First, let's talk language. The Austronesian language family is one of the most widespread in the world, with over 1,200 languages spoken today. It's like the linguistic version of a blockbuster franchise that just keeps expanding its universe. From Tagalog in the Philippines to Maori in New Zealand, these languages are living testaments to the Austronesian legacy. They remind us that language isn't just a tool for communication, it's a vessel for culture, tradition, and identity. It's the original cultural glue, binding communities together across vast distances. But it wasn't just words that the Austronesians spread. They also left genetic footprints that are still visible today. Modern genetic studies reveal that the Austronesians contributed significantly to the gene pool of many Pacific populations. This genetic blending is like a human tapestry woven together by threads of migration and intermingling. It's a reminder that human history is a story of movement and connection, not isolation. Now, let's shift our gaze to the cultural impact. The Austronesians were the original cultural exchange students, spreading their traditions and adopting new ones along the way. They introduced agricultural practices that transformed island ecosystems and laid the groundwork for sustainable living. They brought with them crops like taro, bananas, and sugarcane, which became staples in many Pacific diets. This wasn't just about planting seeds, it was about cultivating resilience and adaptability. And speaking of resilience, let's debunk the myth of the idyllic island paradise. The Austronesian legacy includes a deep understanding of environmental stewardship. Island life demanded a keen awareness of natural resources and a commitment to sustainability long before it became a buzzword. These early navigators understood that survival depended on balance between human needs and environmental limits. They were the original eco-warriors, practicing conservation out of necessity rather than ideology. Yet, it's not all sunshine and bamboo huts. The Austronesian legacy also includes stories of conflict and colonization. As these explorers spread across the Pacific, they encountered new peoples and new challenges. Sometimes this led to cooperation and cultural blending, but other times it resulted in clashes and conquest. It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white. It's a kaleidoscope of human ambition and struggle. Now, let's fast forward to the present day, where the Austronesian spirit of exploration still thrives. Modern Pacific cultures continue to draw on their seafaring heritage, celebrating their ancestors' achievements through festivals, rituals, and storytelling. Canoe voyaging has experienced a revival, with traditional navigation techniques being taught to new generations. It's a way of reconnecting with the past while charting a course for the future. And then there are the modern explorers, those intrepid souls who retrace these ancient paths with the help of GPS and satellite imagery. It's a delicious irony that the same routes once navigated by starlight are now being mapped by technology. These modern adventurers are like time travelers, bridging the gap between the ancient and the digital age. They remind us that exploration is a timeless pursuit, driven by the same curiosity and wonder that propelled the Austronesians thousands of years ago. In the end, the legacy of the Austronesian voyages is a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. These were people who saw the horizon not as a boundary, but as an invitation. They remind us that exploration is about more than just discovering new lands. It's about forging connections and building bridges. Their story is a celebration of the human spirit's relentless quest to explore, adapt, and thrive. So, as we wrap up this epic tale, let's take a moment to appreciate the Austronesians' enduring impact. They left a legacy that continues to shape the Pacific and inspire new generations of explorers. Their journeys were not just about conquering the seas, they were about navigating the complexities of human existence. And in that sense, their story is still being written, one voyage at a time. In the bustling chaos of post-revolutionary France, where political unrest was as common as a baguette on a Parisian breakfast table, a boy named Évariste de Galois was cutting his mathematical teeth. Born in 1811, just a stone's throw away from Napoleon's exit stage left, Galois grew up in a world where the ink on revolutionary pamphlets was barely dry, and the Bourbon monarchy was trying to reattach its severed head. The Bourbon Restoration was like a never-ending family reunion, where no one quite remembered why they were arguing, yet everyone insisted on bringing it up over and over again. His father, Nicolas Gabriel Galois, was the mayor of Bourg-la-Reine, a small town a few miles south of Paris. Now, Nicolas wasn't your average mayor. He had a penchant for liberal politics and was known to engage in heated debates that would make today's political Twitter feuds look like friendly chats over coffee. This was a man who knew how to light up a room, particularly when it was with the fiery rhetoric of change and progress. It was in this vibrant, politically charged atmosphere that young Évariste first learned to count not just numbers, but also the ways of the world. Évariste's mother, Adelaide Marie, was a different story altogether. Picture a woman who could recite Latin classics with the same ease that others recite grocery lists. She was Évariste's first teacher, and she had a knack for nurturing her son's budding genius. By the age of 12, Évariste was already diving headfirst into the world of mathematics, tackling complex equations with a casual indifference that most of us reserve for opening a bag of chips. While other kids were struggling with basic arithmetic, Évariste was busy unraveling algebraic mysteries that would make even seasoned mathematicians raise an eyebrow. The political backdrop of the time was a veritable circus of power struggles and social upheavals. The Bourbons, having regained the throne after Napoleon's downfall, were trying to piece together a France that had been torn apart by revolution. It was a time when the air was thick with the scent of rebellion, and the streets were alive with the sound of dissent. The Bourbon monarchy, led by Louis XVI, and later his brother Charles X, was like an aging rock band trying to stay relevant in a world that had moved on. They were faced with the formidable task of restoring order while keeping a lid on the revolutionary fervour that still simmered beneath the surface. In the middle of this political stew, young Évariste was honing his mathematical skills. His talent was evident to anyone who cared to notice, and by the time he was ready to attend secondary school, he had already outgrown most of the curriculum. At the Lycée Louis le Grand in Paris, a school famous for churning out intellectual heavyweights, Galois's exceptional abilities quickly became apparent. While his peers were scribbling notes in the margins of their textbooks, Évariste was busy scribbling proofs that left his teachers scratching their heads. But Évariste's story isn't just one of prodigious talent, it's also a tale of a young man navigating the turbulent waters of 19th century France. The Bourbon Restoration was a period marked by economic instability, social unrest, and a general sense of uncertainty about the future. For the Galois family, this meant living in a society where one's political beliefs could land you in hot water, or worse. Nicholas's liberal leanings and public role as mayor often put the family in the crosshairs of political adversaries. The pressures of maintaining one's convictions in a world that was constantly shifting underfoot was a challenge that shaped Évariste's worldview from an early age. Despite the societal pressures and the chaotic political climate, Évariste's mathematical prowess continued to flourish. He was the kind of student who could understand complex theorems at a glance, much to the chagrin of his less gifted classmates. But his brilliance was a double-edged sword. It earned him both admiration and resentment. Some saw him as a wonderkind, destined for greatness. Others viewed him as an arrogant upstart who needed to be taken down a peg. Évariste, for his part, seemed largely indifferent to the opinions of others. He was more interested in exploring the infinite possibilities of mathematics than in winning any popularity contests. As he grew older, Évariste's focus on mathematics became more intense, even as the world around him seemed to be spiraling into chaos. The Bourbon monarchy's attempts to clamp down on dissent only fueled the flames of revolution, and by 1830 France was once again on the brink of upheaval. The July Revolution would soon topple Charles X, ushering in the July monarchy under Louis Philippe. It was in this environment of political tension and social change that Évariste would come into his own, both as a mathematician and as a revolutionary in his own right. But before we get ahead of ourselves, it's important to understand the foundation that was laid in these early years. Évariste's upbringing in a politically active family instilled in him a sense of social responsibility and a willingness to question authority. His mother's dedication to his education provided him with the intellectual tools he needed to explore the complexities of mathematics, and the chaotic world of post-revolutionary France served as the backdrop against which his story would unfold. A world where the only constant was change, and the future was as uncertain as the outcome of any given political debate. In these formative years, Évariste Galois was not just learning about numbers and equations, he was learning about the power of ideas and the impact they could have on the world. It was a lesson that would stay with him throughout his short life, and one that would ultimately define his legacy as both a mathematical genius and a revolutionary thinker. As we delve deeper into his story, we'll see how these early experiences shaped not only his approach to mathematics, but also his approach to life itself. A life that, though tragically brief, would leave an indelible mark on the world. Now, if anyone thought the path to academic success was a smooth ride for Évariste Galois, they were in for a rude awakening. The world of higher education in early 19th century France was as much about navigating the choppy waters of institutional politics as it was about intellectual prowess. Galois, however, was never one to play by the rules, or even acknowledge that rules existed in the first place. First up, the École Polytechnique, the crown jewel of French academic institutions. It was the place where the brightest minds went to transform themselves into the engineers and scientists who would shape the future. For Galois, a young man whose mathematical talent was as undeniable as it was unconventional, the École Polytechnique seemed like the perfect fit. Only, reality had other plans. Galois's first attempt to enter the prestigious school in 1828 didn't exactly go according to plan. The entrance exams were notoriously difficult, designed to weed out all but the most mathematically inclined. But for Évariste, it wasn't the math that tripped him up, it was the pressure. His nerves got the better of him, and he failed to make the cut. It was a harsh reminder that even mathematical prodigies are susceptible to stage fright. Undeterred, Galois tried again the following year. He was older, a bit wiser, and definitely more determined. But fate, it seems, had a cruel sense of humour. This time, his examiner was allegedly a former student of his father, someone who wasn't exactly keen on the Galois family. The interview didn't go well, and Galois found himself once again on the outside looking in. It was as if the universe was conspiring to keep him away from the one place he seemed destined for. But Évariste wasn't one to wallow in self-pity. If the École Polytechnique didn't want him, he'd simply take his talents elsewhere. Enter the École Normale, another prestigious institution, albeit one with a focus on training teachers. Galois enrolled there in 1829, ready to continue his mathematical journey. But, as with most things in his life, His time at the École Normale was anything but normal. The political climate was heating up, and Galois's tendency to speak his mind landed him in hot water. He wasn't exactly the model student, more like the student who models how not to behave if you want to stay in school. His outspoken nature and revolutionary fervour made him a target for administrators who preferred their students to be seen and not heard. It wasn't long before Évariste found himself expelled, his academic career seemingly in tatters. But let's not forget that we're talking about a teenage genius who, in his spare time, was busy discovering new mathematical truths that would eventually lead to the development of group theory. His academic misadventures might have sidelined him temporarily, but they certainly didn't slow him down. Case in point, his submissions to the French Academy of Sciences. In 1829, Galois sent in a paper that contained groundbreaking ideas about polynomial equations. The paper was handed to Augustin Louis Cauchy, a prominent mathematician of the time who was supposed to evaluate it. Only, the paper somehow got lost in the shuffle. Misplaced, forgotten, who knows? The result was the same, another missed opportunity for Évariste to gain the recognition he so richly deserved. Undeterred, Galois submitted another paper in 1830. This time, he was told that his work would be reviewed for the Academy's grand prize in mathematics. Except, disaster struck again. The paper was entrusted to the mathematician Joseph Fourier, who unfortunately passed away before he could even take a look at it. To say that Galois's career was plagued by bad luck would be a monumental understatement. It's almost as if the universe had it out for him, throwing obstacle after obstacle in his path. Yet, despite these setbacks, Évariste continued to push forward, driven by a passion for mathematics that refused to be extinguished. His persistence in the face of such adversity is nothing short of remarkable, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a young man who refused to let the world define his worth. But let's not gloss over the fact that this was also a time of significant economic and social change. France, still reeling from the aftershocks of the July Revolution of 1830, was a nation in flux. The economy was struggling, and the gap between the wealthy elite and the working class seemed to grow wider by the day. It was in this context that Galois, a young man of modest means, was trying to carve out a place for himself in a world that seemed intent on keeping him down. His repeated rejections and academic missteps didn't just reflect personal failings, they were emblematic of a society grappling with its own identity, caught between the old regime and the promise of a new order. Évariste Galois, with his radical ideas and refusal to conform, was very much a product of his time. A time when the old rules were being challenged and the future was anything but certain. As we continue to explore the life and legacy of this extraordinary young man, we'll see how his story is more than just a series of unfortunate events. It's a story of resilience, of a mind that dared to question the status quo, and of a legacy that would outlive the short years of its creator. Stay tuned, because the best or perhaps the most tragic parts of Galois's journey are yet to come. But let's not forget that Évariste Galois wasn't just a mathematical prodigy caught in an endless loop of bad luck and thwarted ambition, he was also a political firebrand. The kind of guy who could light up a room with his ideas just before being kicked out of it. You see, in the France of the 1830s, political activism wasn't just a hobby, it was practically a contact sport. And Galois, with the same intensity he brought to solving polynomial equations, threw himself into the political fray with gusto. Évariste joined the Société des Amis du Peuple, a republican society that was as subtle in its aims as a bull in a china shop. This was no genteel book club. It was a gathering of individuals who looked at the Bourbon monarchy and thought, yeah, we can do better. These were folks who believed in liberty, equality, and fraternity. The French Revolution's greatest hits. Now, Galois didn't just sit in the back row nodding along politely. Nope, our young mathematician took to the streets, waving the banner of revolution like he was auditioning for the lead role in Les Miserables. He was vocal, passionate, and not exactly known for his tact. His speeches were less gentle persuasion and more fiery sermon, which in a France jittery from recent revolutions was like waving a red flag in front of a bull. It wasn't long before Évariste's revolutionary activities caught the attention of the authorities, who clearly had a different definition of freedom of speech. Cue the first of his numerous arrests. In the spring of 1831, Galois found himself bundled off to Saint-Pélagie prison, a place that was less five-star hotel and more rustic charm with a side of hard labour. But let's be real, if France were giving out frequent flyer miles for time served, Galois would have earned enough for a trip around the world. He was arrested for a public toast. Yes, you heard that right, a toast. But not just any toast. During a banquet commemorating the fall of Charles X, Galois raised his glass to the health of King Louis Philippe, while ominously brandishing a knife. It was the 19th century equivalent of a Twitter feud gone rogue. The authorities, with all the humour of a wet napkin, took this as a threat and decided to give Galois a taste of their hospitality. But here's the kicker. The toast wasn't even aimed at Louis Philippe. It was a symbolic gesture, a nod to the imminent demise of monarchy itself. Unfortunately, subtlety wasn't exactly the strong suit of the French legal system at the time. Galois spent several months behind bars, his only company being the echoes of his own thoughts and maybe a few rats. Now, it's easy to romanticize Galois as a tragic revolutionary, a martyr for the cause. But let's inject a dose of reality into this myth. Life in 19th century French prisons was no picnic. The conditions were dire, the food was worse, and the only thing more oppressive than the walls were the guards. It was a place designed to break spirits, not foster them. Yet, somehow, Galois saw it as an opportunity to sharpen his political acumen. With his release, you'd think he'd lay low, maybe take up a less hazardous hobby like knitting. But no, Galois doubled down on his revolutionary activities. Like a gambler on a losing streak who just can't walk away from the table, he continued to attend meetings, write incendiary pamphlets, and generally make a nuisance of himself to anyone with a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. By 1832, Galois was back in the crosshairs of the law. This time, it was for allegedly plotting against the state, an accusation that was as vague as it was serious. His subsequent arrest and imprisonment were almost inevitable. It was as if the authorities had put Galois on speed dial, ready to whisk him away at the first sign of trouble. His time in prison only seemed to fuel his revolutionary zeal. He was like a pressure cooker, with each arrest adding more steam to his fiery resolve. Yet, the romantic image of Galois as a fearless revolutionary belies the harsh reality of his incarceration. Prison was no place for a dreamer. It was a harsh, unforgiving environment that could crush even the strongest spirits. But Galois was made of sterner stuff. He used his time in confinement to reflect on the political turmoil of his day, writing letters and essays that spoke to a deep understanding of the social forces at play. He was a man ahead of his time, seeing the world not just as it was, but as it could be, a place where ideas mattered more than titles and where mathematics and politics were two sides of the same coin. Yet, for all his brilliance, Galois was trapped in a system that had little patience for dissent. His repeated arrests and imprisonments were a testament to a society that couldn't quite handle the truth he was trying to tell. It was a world where the price of speaking one's mind was often paid in days, months, or even years lost to the confines of a cell. So, what's the takeaway here? Galois was more than just a mathematical genius or a political firebrand. He was a man who stood at the crossroads of history, attempting to navigate a world that seemed intent on tripping him at every turn. His story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of ideologically driven politics, and a reminder of the personal costs of standing up for one's beliefs. As we continue to delve into the life of Évariste Galois, it becomes clear that his legacy is as much about his contributions to mathematics as it is about his unwavering commitment to social change. His life was a complex equation, one that we're still trying to solve. And as we dig deeper into the layers of his story, we'll see how his radical ideas and unyielding spirit continue to resonate, long after the echoes of his last toast have faded into history. Galois's story doesn't end with some triumphant return to academic glory or a peaceful retirement spent pondering equations. Nope, our firebrand mathematician took a decidedly more dramatic exit from the stage of life, and his final days are shrouded in a haze of mystery and intrigue that could give any crime thriller a run for its money. Picture this. It's 1832, and France is still reeling from the July Revolution. The political scene can best be described as a precarious tightrope walk between chaos and order, with everyone from monarchists to republicans vying for their place in the sun. Against this backdrop, Évariste Galois, now all of 20 years old, found himself caught in a web of personal and political tensions that would ultimately lead to a tragic, untimely death. The story goes that Galois's life was cut short by a duel, an event as enigmatic as it was fatal. Duels in 19th century France weren't exactly rare. They were practically a national pastime for those who had a point to prove or an ego to defend. But the circumstances surrounding Galois's duel are anything but typical. Rumour has it that a woman was involved, a mysterious figure named Stéphanie Félicie Poitarine du Mortel, who allegedly captured young Évariste's heart. The romantic narrative paints a picture of a love triangle gone awry, leading to a fateful showdown at dawn. But let's hit pause on this tale of passion and jealousy for a reality check. While it's tempting to imagine Galois as the tragic hero of a romantic drama, the truth is likely more complex and a lot less glamorous. The socio-political tensions of the time were running high, and Galois, with his penchant for stirring the pot, had more than a few enemies. The duel could very well have been politically motivated, a not-so-subtle way to silence a revolutionary voice that wouldn't stop speaking truth to power. To add another layer of intrigue, consider the timing. Galois's duel took place on May 30, 1832, just as a cholera epidemic was sweeping through Paris, adding a grim sense of urgency to an already fraught situation. As the city grappled with disease and disorder, the stage was set for a confrontation that was as much about the clashing ideologies of the time as it was about personal enmity. As for the duel itself, details are sketchy at best. What we do know is that it took place in a field outside Paris, under the early morning light, a traditional setting for settling scores. Galois, ever the idealist, reportedly fired his shot into the air, a gesture that speaks to his character and convictions. His opponent, however, had no such qualms and hit Galois in the abdomen, a wound that would prove fatal. The aftermath saw Galois taken to a nearby hospital, where he lingered for a day before succumbing to his injuries on May 31, 1832. He was 20 years old. Not quite old enough to drink legally in today's world, yet already leaving behind a legacy that would echo through the halls of mathematics long after his passing. In his final hours, Galois penned a letter to his Republican comrades, urging them to carry on the fight for liberty and equality, a poignant reminder of the causes that defined his short life. But here's the kicker. Galois wasn't just a mathematical genius or a fiery revolutionary. He was a human being caught in the crossfire of his era's turbulent politics. His death was a product of the times, a stark reflection of a society struggling to find its footing amid rapid change. The romanticized tales of love and betrayal are enticing, sure, but they obscure the broader context of a young man whose life was inextricably linked to the revolutionary fervor of his age. So, what's the takeaway? Galois's story is a reminder that history is rarely as straightforward as it seems. It's easy to get swept up in the drama of duels and doomed romances, but the truth often lies in the gritty details, the economic pressures, the political tensions, and the personal rivalries that shape our lives in ways both profound and prosaic. In a world where dueling was as much about honor as it was about survival, Galois's final act was a testament to the courage of his convictions. He was the young man who dared to challenge the status quo, to dream of a better future, even when the cost was his own life. And while the myths surrounding his death may be alluring, let's not lose sight of the real story, the story of a mind that refused to be silenced, a spirit that couldn't be contained, and a legacy that continues to inspire. As we move forward in exploring Galois's life, let's keep our eyes on the broader picture, on the societal currents that swept him up and, ultimately, brought him down. His story is far from over, and the echoes of his brilliance still reverberate through the fields of mathematics and beyond. Stay tuned for more insights into the life of Évariste Galois, a young man whose genius was matched only by his passion for change. Évariste Galois's story is far from over, even if his life was tragically cut short. Because here's the kicker. Sometimes, genius isn't recognized in one's own lifetime. It's like being the opening act for a rock concert where nobody's arrived yet. The audience only shows up when the main event is long gone. Fast forward to a few decades after Galois's untimely exit, and his mathematical work finally found its stage. In 1846, Joseph Louville, a prominent mathematician of that era, dusted off Galois's overlooked papers and published them in his journal. It was like discovering a lost album from a musical prodigy, except instead of catchy tunes, we had groundbreaking concepts in algebra. Galois's work laid the foundation for what we now call group theory, a subject so abstract and pioneering that even today it makes seasoned mathematicians break out in a nervous sweat. This wasn't just math for math's sake. Group theory became the Swiss Army knife for tackling some of the toughest problems in physics, chemistry, and cryptography. It's the mathematical equivalent of a superhero cape, helping to understand everything from the symmetry of molecules to the fundamental forces of nature. Here's where the irony kicks in with a steel-toed boot. Galois' revolutionary ideas gained acclaim only after he was no longer around to bask in the limelight. His theories, once dismissed or ignored, became the bedrock of modern algebra, influencing not just the realm of numbers, but the very fabric of scientific thought. It's the ultimate posthumous standing ovation, the kind that would make anyone wish they could come back for an encore. But why was Galois's work so groundbreaking? It's because he was the first to use the concept of a group to determine the solvability of polynomial equations. In simpler terms, he figured out the secret code to determine which equations could be solved with a neat formula and which couldn't. Picture trying to crack a safe with a combination lock, and Galois is the guy who figured out which locks have combinations and which are just there to frustrate you. In the world of mathematics, this was akin to discovering a new continent, terra incognita, for the minds of the time. His methods provided a new lens through which to view mathematical problems, a perspective shift that echoes with the force of a tectonic plate shifting beneath the feet of traditional thinkers. But let's not romanticize this too much without acknowledging the harsh realities. The world of 19th century mathematics was not a friendly garden party. It was more like a high-stakes poker game in a smoke-filled back room, where only the most daring players could hold their own. Galois was a maverick in this cutthroat environment, his ideas too radical for the conservative establishment that preferred their numbers neatly boxed and predictable. And yet, for all his brilliance, Galois was a product of his times, a young man whose genius was as explosive as the political turmoil surrounding him. His life was a testament to the turbulent intersection of intellectual fervor and societal upheaval. He was a walking contradiction, a mathematician with the soul of a revolutionary, an idealist in an era that chewed up and spat out dreamers with alarming regularity. Galois's story serves as a poignant reminder of the human capacity for brilliance, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. It's a narrative that underscores a universal truth. Sometimes the greatest minds are those that refuse to conform, to bow to the pressures of a world that insists on fitting square pegs into round holes. As we reflect on Évariste Galois's legacy, it's essential to remember the broader context, the world of 19th century France, where youthful rebellion was more than just an act of defiance, it was a survival strategy. His life and work encapsulate the collision of genius and politics, a vivid reminder that intellectual breakthroughs often occur in the spaces between conformity and chaos. So, the next time you encounter a mathematical concept that twists your brain into a pretzel, spare a thought for the young revolutionary who dared to think differently, who saw the world not just as it was, but as it could be. Galois's legacy is a testament to the power of ideas, the enduring impact of a mind unafraid to challenge the status quo. In a world often content with mediocrity, Évariste Galois remains a beacon of brilliance, a reminder that true genius is never truly lost, only waiting to be rediscovered. Thomas Paine's journey from the cobblestone streets of Thetford, England, to the revolutionary hotbed of America is like a roller coaster ride designed by a corset maker who forgot to measure twice. Born in 1737, Paine came into the world in a town so small it made Maybury look like Manhattan. Thetford was the kind of place where everyone knew your business, and the business was usually about who had the best gossip. Paine's father, Joseph, was a Quaker staymaker, a fancy term for a corset maker, which was a respectable but not exactly adventurous profession. Little did Joseph know his son was destined for a life that would make the concept of staying seem laughable. Young Thomas, or Tom as his mates might have called him, got a start in the family business of corsetry. Picture him, needle in hand, stitching away on whalebone stays while dreaming of a life beyond stitching bodices. It's probably safe to say he didn't see himself as the poster boy for revolutionary thought as he helped shape the figures of 18th century women. But hey, everyone has to start somewhere, and Paine somewhere was in the back room of a corset shop, dreaming of the big ideas that were to come. Now, if you think that corset making was the pinnacle of Paine's early career, you'd be in for a surprise. After all, the man wasn't satisfied with just one trade. In 1761, he took on the role of an excise officer, essentially a tax collector, in the town of Grantham. He was responsible for ensuring that merchants and tradesmen paid their taxes on goods like brandy and beer. It was a job that came with a respectable salary of $50 a year, about $8,000 in today's money. But Paine was as good at collecting taxes as a sieve is at holding water. His stint as a taxman was riddled with more holes than a piece of Swiss cheese. He was twice dismissed for neglecting his duties, in part because he spent more time thinking about how unfair taxes were than actually collecting them. Paine's personal life was just as tumultuous as his professional one. His first marriage, to Mary Lambert in 1751, was tragically short-lived. She died in childbirth within a year. Paine's second attempt at matrimonial bliss wasn't much better. He married Elizabeth Olive in 1771, but the union was as rocky as a New England coastline. The couple separated in 1774, with Paine leaving England shortly afterward. It seemed he was better at splitting from wives than splitting hairs in his political arguments. Here's where the myth-busting comes in. Paine didn't just have a sudden epiphany and decide to sail to America on a whim. No, his passage to the New World was partly due to a chance meeting with Benjamin Franklin. Yep, that Benjamin Franklin, founding father, inventor, and all-around Renaissance man. Franklin saw something in Paine's restless spirit and perhaps a bit of himself. With Franklin's encouragement and possibly a letter of introduction tucked into his pocket, Paine set sail for the American colonies in 1774. The voyage across the Atlantic was no pleasure cruise. It took nearly 2 months of rough seas and cramped quarters before he finally landed in Philadelphia. But instead of being seasick, Paine was sea-slick, ready to slide into the burgeoning world of revolutionary America. He arrived at a time when tensions between the colonies and Britain were simmering like a pot of Boston clam chowder left on the burner too long. To say Paine hit the ground running would be an understatement. Within months of arriving, he was writing for the Pennsylvania Magazine, a publication that paid him $50 a year, coincidentally the same amount he earned as an excise officer, but likely more rewarding. His articles were a heady mix of philosophy, science, and politics, and he quickly gained a reputation for being a bit of an intellectual firebrand. So, what did all these early misadventures and career missteps teach Paine? Well, if nothing else, he learned that the status quo was about as appealing as a soggy biscuit. His time as a corset maker taught him the value of structure and support concepts he would later apply to his political writings. His failed marriages and career hiccups taught him resilience, a quality that would prove invaluable as he prepared to challenge some of the most powerful forces in the world. In this mix of personal and professional chaos, Paine began to crystallize the ideas that would make him one of the most influential pamphleteers in history. He was about to take the world stage, but not before a few more bumps and bruises along the way. Stay tuned, because Paine's story is just getting started, and it's as unpredictable as a colonial weather forecast. Paine was about to take the world stage, but first he needed to find his voice and a good pen. Enter 1776, a year that would go down in history more dramatically than a soap opera finale. It was a time when American colonists were sipping their morning tea with a side of grievances against the British Crown. They were done with King George III's antics, and the atmosphere was as charged as a thunderstorm over Philadelphia. Into this electric climate strode Thomas Paine, armed with a quill and a penchant for shaking things up like a revolutionary bartender mixing a political Molotov cocktail. His weapon of choice? A pamphlet titled Common Sense, which he published anonymously on January 10, 1776. Why anonymously? Well, let's just say that openly advocating for treason against the British Empire was akin to playing hopscotch in a minefield. Paine may have been bold, but he wasn't foolish. The pamphlet was a masterclass in clear, persuasive writing, like a TED Talk before TED Talks were cool. It was written in plain language, direct and unapologetic, making it accessible to everyone from the educated elite to the everyday farmer who'd rather be ploughing fields than deciphering political jargon. Now, let's talk sales numbers, because Common Sense wasn't just a flash in the pan, it was a full-blown wildfire. Within the first few months, it sold over 120,000 copies, a staggering figure considering there were only about 2.5 million people living in the colonies at the time. That's like one pamphlet for every 20 colonists, assuming they didn't just pass it around at barn dances and tavern meetings. By the end of the year, it had sold over 500,000 copies, equivalent to selling tens of millions in today's market. It was the colonial version of going viral, without the help of cat memes or TikTok dances. Why did Common Sense resonate so deeply? Paine had a knack for cutting through the noise and distilling complex ideas into the kind of truths that slapped you in the face and demanded your attention. He argued that it was absurd for a small island like Britain to rule a vast continent like America, and that monarchy was an outdated institution, as useful as a chocolate teapot. He called for independence, not just as a political necessity, but as a moral imperative. His words were a rallying cry, urging the colonists to see themselves not as subjects, but as citizens of a new world ripe for the making. And here's where the irony kicks in like a plot twist in a Shakespearean comedy. The man sparking this fervour was none other than a British immigrant. Yep, Paine was the ultimate outsider, a man who'd left his homeland only to become the voice of its colonial offspring's rebellion. It's the kind of twist that would make even Alanis Morissette nod in appreciation. Imagine the British government's chagrin when they realised that one of their own had essentially handed the colonies a roadmap to independence. But let's not romanticise this too much. Life wasn't all pamphlets and applause for Paine. He was also an agitator, someone who liked to poke the bear and see what happened. His writing didn't just inspire, it incited. The British Crown wasn't about to send him a thank you note, and the risk of being hanged for treason loomed large. Yet Paine thrived on this tension, like a surfer riding the crest of a revolutionary wave, knowing full well that a wipeout could mean disaster. Economically, the colonies were in a tight spot. The British had saddled them with taxes that were as heavy as a lead-lined tea chest, and Paine's arguments provided the intellectual tinder needed to ignite economic resistance. He laid out the financial absurdities of British rule, pointing out that America's trade and prosperity were being stifled by a government thousands of miles away. His pamphlet was like the ultimate economic audit, exposing the inefficiencies and injustices of colonial rule with the finesse of a financial whiz-kid dissecting a dodgy balance sheet. Politically, Common Sense was a game-changer. It wasn't just a pamphlet. It was a manifesto for a new kind of governance, one that rejected monarchy in favour of a republic grounded in democratic principles. The pamphlet's impact was so profound that it reached the Continental Congress, influencing their decision to declare independence a mere 6 months later. Paine had effectively turned the colonial zeitgeist on its head, giving the leaders the ideological ammunition they needed to take the leap into the unknown. But amidst the success and the chaos, what really stands out is Paine's unshakable belief in the power of the written word. He understood that ideas could be as potent as any musket ball, and he wielded his pen like a seasoned marksman. Common Sense wasn't just a pamphlet, it was a call to arms, a clarion bell ringing out across the colonies, urging them to embrace their destiny and shed the shackles of oppression. As 1776 rolled on, Paine's influence only grew. His words echoed in the halls of power and the streets of every colonial city. Common Sense was more than a pamphlet. It was the spark that set the American Revolution ablaze. And like any good revolutionary, Paine didn't just light the fire, he fanned the flames, ensuring that the desire for independence burned brightly in the hearts of the colonists. So, there you have it, the story of how a former corset maker from England became the unlikely hero of American independence. As we move forward, remember that Paine's journey was far from over. He still had battles to fight, ideas to champion, and controversies to stir. Stay tuned, because if you thought this was the climax, you'd be as wrong as wearing a cravat with a t-shirt. There's more to come, and it promises to be just as unpredictable and thrilling as the chapters we've uncovered so far. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Paine's role in the American Revolution was far from over, and the aftershocks of Common Sense were just starting to ripple through the colonies like caffeine through a sleep-deprived student's veins. The ink was barely dry on the Declaration of Independence when Paine found himself in the thick of the Revolutionary War. In a twist of fate that only history could script, He went from pamphleteer to participant, rolling up his sleeves and getting his ink-stained hands dirty in the revolution he'd helped ignite. Now don't picture Paine as some swashbuckling hero with a sabre in one hand and a flag in the other. His weapon was still his pen, but his words continued to carry the punch of a well-aimed cannonball. In 1777, he was appointed as secretary to the Committee for Foreign Affairs, a gig that sounds glamorous but was about as stable as a Jenga tower in a wind tunnel. His job was to manage communications with American diplomats abroad, a task that involved sorting through more correspondence than a postal clerk at Christmas time. But the romance of revolution is often shadowed by the stark reality of economics. Paine, despite his pivotal contributions, found his wallet lighter than a patriot's powder keg. You see, revolutions aren't cheap, and neither is surviving one. The Continental Congress had a knack for issuing paper money that was about as valuable as monopoly bills. Paine's government salary was paid in this depreciating currency, leaving him perpetually strapped for cash. It's a bit like being paid in IOUs at a yard sale. Sure, it's something, but good luck buying groceries with it. And yet Paine soldiered on, his resolve as unyielding as the New England winters. He penned The American Crisis, a series of pamphlets designed to boost morale among the troops and the public. The first line of the series, "These are the times that try men's souls," is as iconic as the Liberty Bell and probably just as cracked from overuse. But it hit home, rallying the weary and war-torn colonists like a pep talk before the big game. Let's not forget Paine's interactions with the who's who of revolutionary America. His relationship with George Washington was a mix of respect and occasional exasperation. Washington, the stoic commander-in-chief, valued Paine's writing, but found his fiery personality a bit like a firecracker, explosive and unpredictable. Paine once quipped that Washington had a better opinion of his head than his heart, a sentiment that probably would have earned him a stern look from the general himself. Amidst the camaraderie and clashing egos, Paine's financial struggles were no laughing matter. He was a revolutionary rock star without the royalties, a best-selling author with pockets emptier than a politician's promise. Even after the war, when the dust settled and the colonies emerged as the United States, Paine's bank account remained stubbornly unpatriotic. Congress granted him $3,000 for his contributions, which was like handing a Nobel Prize winner a gift card to the local diner. It was something, sure, but it wasn't going to cover the cost of living in post-revolutionary America. Yet through it all, Paine's spirit never waned. He was the kind of person who could find humor in hardship, a trait that endeared him to his contemporaries even as it frustrated them. One anecdote tells of Paine sharing a meal with Washington, who famously had a penchant for lavish dinner parties. As the story goes, Paine, ever the pragmatist, quipped that he preferred his meals simple and his revolutions complex, a line that might not have made it into the official biographies, but certainly captures his essence. Economically, the fledgling nation was in dire straits, struggling to find its footing like a toddler learning to walk. The war had left the country with a debt as towering as a Boston steeple, and the transition from colony to country wasn't going to pay for itself. Paine's writings continued to serve as a guiding light, urging Americans to embrace their new identity and the responsibilities that came with it. Politically, his influence stretched beyond borders. His ideas resonated with revolutionaries across the ocean, particularly in France, where they were as popular as baguettes and existentialism. But that's a story for another day. For now, Paine was content to keep his quill moving, crafting the narrative of an emerging nation with the fervor of a scribe chronicling a new era. So, as America took its first steps into independence, Paine remained a key player, his life a tapestry of triumphs and trials. He was a man who lived for the cause, even when the cause seemed to forget him. But if history is any guide, it's clear that Thomas Paine was never in it for the money or the glory. He was in it for the ideas, the belief that words could change the world, and maybe, just maybe, help a struggling nation find its way. Stay tuned, because Paine's story isn't finished yet. There are more revolutions to incite, more ideas to explore, and more myths to bust. If you thought this was the end of the chapter, you'd be as mistaken as a redcoat at a Boston Tea Party. There's more to come, and it promises to be as enlightening as it is entertaining. As America found its sea legs in the choppy waters of newfound independence, Thomas Paine was already looking across the Atlantic, his eyes set on the next revolutionary stage, France. If you thought Paine would kick back and enjoy a well-deserved rest after helping to birth a nation, think again. He was like a rock star who, having just played a sold-out show, decided to do an impromptu encore on another continent. Paine's next act, The Rights of Man, was his magnum opus, and like any good sequel, it was bigger, bolder, and unapologetically more controversial. Published in 2 parts in 1791 and 1792, this was Paine's fiery response to Edmund Burke's Reflections on the Revolution in France, which had criticised the French Revolution with the kind of disdain usually reserved for soggy British weather. Paine, never one to shy away from a fight, took up his pen like a knight wielding a shiny new sword. Now, let's talk numbers. The Rights of Man sold approximately 200,000 copies in just a few years, a remarkable feat given that Britain's population was around 11 million at the time. That's roughly 1 copy for every 55 people, a stat that would make any modern-day publisher salivate like Pavlov's dog at a bell-ringing convention. In The Rights of Man, Paine didn't just defend the French Revolution, he turbocharged the discourse on human rights and governance. He argued that government should exist to protect the rights of the people, not to serve the whims of a monarchy. Revolutionary? Absolutely. Dangerous? You bet. Paine was essentially suggesting that the traditional power structures were about as useful as a chocolate hammer, appealing at first glance, but ultimately impractical. But here's where the romantic ideal of revolution clashes head-on with grim reality. While Paine was busy writing about liberty and equality, the streets of Paris ran red with the blood of the Reign of Terror. The guillotine, that macabre symbol of revolutionary justice, was working overtime, and not even Paine was safe from its reach. Arrested in December 1793, he was tossed into Luxembourg prison, the revolutionary tribunal's version of a time-out corner, albeit one with far more dire consequences. Imagine the irony, Paine, the staunch advocate of revolution, now at risk of losing his head to the same forces he championed. It's like being bitten by the pet lion you raised from a cub, unexpected and terrifying. Paine's near execution was a close shave, literally. He escaped the guillotine thanks to a clerical error. His cell door was mistakenly left unmarked by the executioners during a routine head count. Talk about a lucky break. This was more like divine intervention with a bureaucratic twist. While the French Revolution was a bloody affair, Paine's time in France wasn't all doom and gloom. He became a member of the French National Convention, a testament to his enduring influence. However, his idealism often collided with the harsh realities of political machinations. Paine opposed the execution of Louis XVI, arguing that it would set a dangerous precedent for the new republic. Spoiler alert, his plea for mercy was about as effective as a snowball in a blast furnace. The king met his fate, and Paine's stance didn't win him any popularity contests. Paine's experiences in France reveal the messy, often contradictory nature of revolutions. They're like a poorly organized potluck. Everyone's got different ideas about what to bring to the table, and sometimes the dishes don't quite complement each other. The romantic notion of overthrowing tyranny often gives way to the sobering task of governance, a reality Paine faced head-on. But let's not forget his complicated legacy. In America, Paine's contributions to independence were undeniable. Yet his outspoken views on religion later in life, particularly in The Age of Reason, made him as welcome as a skunk at a garden party among the more religiously inclined founding fathers. In France, he was both celebrated and vilified, a hero of liberty who found himself ensnared in the political chaos he once heralded. Economically, France was in turmoil, with inflation and scarcity making life for the average citizen as comfortable as a bed of nails. Paine's economic ideas, advocating for social welfare and progressive taxation, were forward-thinking, yet they struggled to find traction in a nation reeling from revolution. It's the classic tale of visionary ideas clashing with the stubborn grind of reality. Politically, Paine's influence extended beyond his writings. He was a living symbol of the interconnectedness of revolutionary ideals, a bridge between the American and French causes. Yet, his life was a testament to the fact that revolutions are as unpredictable as a cat on a hot tin roof, full of surprises, not all of them pleasant. As we leave Paine amidst the tumult of France, it's clear that his story is far from over. He still had battles to fight, ideas to champion, and controversies to stir. His legacy, like the man himself, is complex and multifaceted, a blend of triumph and tragedy, idealism and realism, and while the revolutions he inspired were fraught with peril and contradiction, Paine's unwavering belief in the power of the written word remained his guiding star. So, stay tuned as we continue to unravel the remarkable tale of Thomas Paine, a man whose ideas transcended borders and whose life was as unpredictable as the revolutions he helped ignite. There's more to come, and if history has taught us anything, it's that the best is always yet to come. And so, as Thomas Paine's French adventure drew to a close, he packed his revolutionary ideals and made his way back to the land where his pamphlets had once sparked fire in the hearts of colonists. But this wasn't exactly a triumphant victory lap. No ticker-tape parades or golden keys to the city awaited him in America. Instead, Paine found a country grappling with its own growing pains, like a teenager with a new driver's license and no map. And Paine? He was more like the forgotten rock star, trying to remind everyone he was once the headliner. Returning to America in 1802, Paine found that his reputation had taken a hit harder than a boxer in the final round. His outspoken views on religion, particularly in the Age of Reason, had made him persona non grata among the pious circles of the young republic. It turns out that questioning the divinity of Christ and the authenticity of the Bible didn't exactly earn him brownie points with a nation that was increasingly embracing a religious revival. The man who had once been the voice of independence was now seen by many as a heretic, as welcome as a rainstorm on a parade. Yet, despite the chilly reception, Paine still held on to his fiery spirit. He rented a small farm in New Rochelle, New York, purchased for him by the state in gratitude for his revolutionary contributions. But let's not romanticize this as a pastoral retreat. The farm was less a bucolic Eden and more a testament to Paine's financial woes. He was living hand to mouth, his pockets as empty as a beggar's cup, and the farm was a far cry from the bustling intellectual salons of Paris or Philadelphia. It was here that Paine spent his final years, penning letters and essays that were often ignored by a public that had moved on, much like a social media influencer whose 15 minutes of fame had long expired. Paine's financial struggles were no secret. By the time of his death in 1889, he was as impoverished as a church mouse, with debts that rivaled those of a compulsive gambler on a losing streak. His funeral was attended by a mere handful of people, a stark contrast to the throngs that had once hung on his every word. It said that only 6 people followed his coffin, a paltry number for a man who had influenced the course of history. Paine, the pamphleteer who had once rallied a nation, was laid to rest with all the fanfare of a forgotten footnote. Yet, despite the humble end, Paine's ideas continued to echo through the corridors of history. His writings on liberty, equality, and democratic governance became foundational texts for movements around the world. The irony, sharper than a guillotine blade, is that while Paine himself died in obscurity, his ideas lived on, growing in influence like a snowball rolling downhill. His thoughts on social welfare and progressive taxation were decades ahead of their time, seeding future debates on economic justice. Let's debunk the myth that Paine was a mere pamphleteer. His legacy is more than just ink on paper. It's a testament to the power of ideas to transcend time and space. Paine understood that revolutions were not just about toppling governments, but about reshaping minds, a notion that remains as relevant today as it was in the 18th century. It's a reminder that the written word, when wielded with skill and passion, can be as powerful as any army. And what lessons can modern audiences glean from Paine's tale of triumph and tragedy? Perhaps it's the enduring truth that true innovation often comes from the fringes, from those who dare to question the status quo. Paine's life was a roller coaster of highs and lows, yet through it all he never wavered in his commitment to speak truth to power. His story is a cautionary tale about the fickleness of public opinion, a reminder that today's hero can become tomorrow's outcast with the turn of a page. In reflecting on Paine's legacy, we see the complex dance of myth and reality. He was both a visionary and a provocateur, a man whose ideas were too big for the confines of his time. His life was a testament to the messy, unpredictable nature of revolutions, full of contradictions and complexities. Yet, amidst the chaos, Paine's unwavering belief in the power of the written word shines through, a guiding light for future generations. So, as we close this chapter on Thomas Paine, let's remember him not just as a historical figure, but as a symbol of the relentless pursuit of truth and justice. His story reminds us that while the road to change is fraught with obstacles, the journey is worth the struggle. Paine's life may have ended quietly, but the echoes of his ideas continue to resonate, challenging us to think, question, and imagine a better world. And with that, we bid farewell to Thomas Paine, the corset maker turned revolutionary icon, whose legacy endures in the pages of history, a testament to the enduring power of ideas. As we move forward, let's carry with us the spirit of Paine, a spirit that dares to dream, to challenge, and to change the world one word at a time.